You know how there's this general idea that in Monster Hunter the game at some point will click, like something will click for you and you will start understanding the game, or not even understanding, but you will start to feel things intuitively, and that will be so attractive and so fun to you that you will start engaging with more Monster Hunter just in general. So my question is, do you think that the game can click multiple times throughout your interaction with Monster Hunter? And
no doubt in my mind. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And if so, how or why?
Oh, hell yeah.
Everything
right,
competes
here we go.
with crit boost,
Okay.
which means it doesn't.
Nothing competes with crit boost.
Nothing can beat crit boost. And it is the most frustrating experience I have ever had theory crafting in a Monster Hunter game.
Part of the reason that a lot of older folk, a lot of more enfranchised folk, are writing their guides is because we went through the pain of gathering that information, of learning those under the hood mechanics, of finding these numbers. And we don't really want to make others do that same legwork, right? Like to have the information more accessible to people is a big reason a lot of people do write quality guides. Just to like give a point on how bad the MH team is at explaining themselves. And that's why I don't think that optimizing ruins the game.
Is it possible to engage in optimization or in optimizing the different aspects of Monster Hunter or on the different aspects of a hunt without having to try hard too much about it?
Yeah.
Oh, 100%.
It is?
I mean,
okay.
If I were to say one thing that I really want the community at large to realize, it's that we also have the capacity to teach and that they can do the same thing we do. We are not special. We're not geniuses. We're just nerds with a bunch of tools.
Welcome yet again to another episode of The Curious Hunter. This time, I'm actually very excited for what we have in store, even though I think that maybe this topic is not particularly attractive to most people in the Monster Hunter community as of today. But that doesn't matter. I do whatever I want with my program. Anyway, today I am Sasch. He has started doing content for educational purposes, and also one of his acquaintances, Upgreid, together with I am Sasch, they work together in different types of calculations and spreadsheets and different types of mechanical components of the game that help us to understand how exactly does Monster Hunter work. So, please guys, say hello.
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 All right. So, as I do with every episode, I am going to do a series of small questions that are mostly to let you guys know where did these people come from, why are they interested in Monster Hunter in general, or more or less what are the things that they like personally, and then we will dive into the actual questions. I guess I'm going to start with I am Sasch, since I talked to you first. Can you introduce yourself?
Well, I'm Sasch, it's in the name. I'm a theory crafter and guide writer for SwitchX specifically, and I've been doing that since early Sunbreak, publicly at least. I speedrun a lot during Sunbreak and typically do so in every MH, just not publicly, to have a certain understanding of how the game works and if all the theory that I do actually lines up in practice. And I'm one of the 3 heads on the Wiggler project.
Perfect. Should we assume that SwitchX is also your favorite weapon?
I would go more specifically. Swax is my favorite. And specifically, it's Dragon's Roar and Sinister Saints back from the Try and Try Ultimate era.
I like that, actually. I like the fact that you have a specific iteration of a weapon that you like. Yeah.
Hard not to when they look like that.
All right, well, and in your opinion, what are the best Monster Hunter fights in the game, or in the franchise in general?
Top 1, just in terms of how it feels and the cinematic of it, and what it embodies, is Atalkar. There is nothing else that's quite that feeling, that generational sort of finish. In terms of the fight itself, pretty torn between Joe, Orochi Kirin, and Sunbreak's iteration of Lucent Naga.
Perfect. Yeah, it's kind of a shame. Since I am a 5th-gen hunter, I haven't really experienced any of those, but I know the story behind Atal'Ka, and I want to see that fight at some point. I really want to.
It is so good.
Perfect. And then what about your most hated monster?
Scene of Turret Class.
Yeesh, okay. Any reason?
Can I curse on this?
All right, well. Is there a story as to how you got hooked into Monster Hunter?
One fateful night, I was sitting in my bed watching TV and zipping around until I got hooked on a skit on our version of MTV, which had a sort of game advertisement show where they just so happened to have showed Monster Hunter Try as it was releasing. And I can't tell why, but something about it just fascinated me to the point that the very next day I went to my local game store and bought a game and just I got giga-walled by the very first village grade Jaggy that you interact with. I got giga-walled. But I got so annoyed at being walled that I ended up learning my way through village and then went on to do the hub side, because back then they were split, and kind of just couldn't stop until I was like properly done. And then at the very end of it, like when I felt like there's nothing more to explore, I ran across another guy that didn't want to wait for a 4th person for a hunt I wanted to do. So we just went with the two of us, and it was significantly faster than anything I've experienced before. Like when the standard hunt would take about 20 to 30 minutes, we would finish it in 7. And I was just so incredibly impressed. And the situation of being in the right spot at the right time, that's a skill that follows me through life, where he just taught me a lot of things. And I just kind of stuck to that. And ever since, I'm barely able to take it to put it down.
Yeah, so there was this aspect, this social aspect that you were able to engage with that a lot of people actually like. In previous episodes, some people have voiced that this is something important for them in the Monster Hunter experience, but they argue that today that is slowly fading away. You don't find as many people that are willing to maybe like go out of their way to teach things to other people or whatever, or there's not really a lot of like reasons to interact with other people in the hunt. But the more you look into like people who experience the older games, the more you have these stories, right, of finding other players that taught them many, many things, and that's how they got hooked on the game.
Mm.
Awesome.
Yeah, can't disagree with that.
Right, okay then, so let's move on now to Upgreid. In your case, Upgreid, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, so I'm Upgreid. You can just call me Raid, either or. I am a longtime theory crafter. I've been doing this since probably around the start of Iceborne. But I started doing my work more publicly around the time that Sunbreak launched. And I specialize in hunting horn. I'm also one of the founders of the Wiggler project, so I spend most of my time now not playing the game as much as I would like to, but just making specialized spreadsheets, simulators, guidelines for people to make set guides for. So just kind of helping people get into theory crafting, understanding kind of what that might entail, giving people tools to make theory crafting easier in the future. And also helping people port those tools over to older games. So people, for example, might be interested in having a more modern, detailed calculator for Iceborne or Sunbreak or Generations, and we can go ahead and the goal of the project is to basically give modern levels of support to older games as people kind of migrate back to older games once they get hooked on the series.
Hell yeah. And well, it's a very appreciated effort, because the more you see people getting into Monster Hunter, now there's this weird phenomenon where people are engaging as the first contact with newer gen and newer titles, and eventually they want to see more from the old titles. It's very interesting. It doesn't happen to everybody, but it's something that I see people doing lately. Okay then, and should we assume also that your favorite weapon is hunting horn?
It is. So heretically enough, in my favorite game, I did not play hunting horn that much. But yes, my favorite weapon is hunting horn.
Awesome. Okay. In your opinion, what are the best fights of the franchise?
So my favorite game being, just to put this out there, Sunbreak. I really enjoyed like the way that Sunbreak had such intricate mechanics. I really loved, working around like the switch skill system, especially around launch. I really enjoyed launch Sunbreak and TU1. So with all of that in mind, I think that my favorite two fights personally are actually Sunbreak's Metal Wraths, which are something that I never thought I would say. I never thought I would enjoy a Metal Wrath fight, and I was so pleasantly surprised by my first encounter with them in Sunbreak, and I just got absolutely hooked. So far and away my favorite fights in the game. If we're looking back a little bit further, yeah, I think for the most part those two take the cake. I've never really enjoyed a fight as much as I have those two, and I would also agree with Sasch. Sunbreak's Lucent Narga is just spectacular.
Yeah, interesting. Well, what about your most hated monster then?
So, if you're talking about any monster, large or small, Conchus.
Huh? What? What? Whatever the Conchus do to you, man? What?
Exist.
This is the closest thing to like, I'm gonna say, to racism that I've experienced in this game.
And by the hard way too.
And if it's a large monster, I hate Juratotus. And the reason I hate Juratotus is not because it's difficult, but because it's so violently dull that at one point I booted up the game because it was late at night and I thought, oh yeah, I'll just get a couple hunts in before I go to bed. And I ended up falling asleep in my chair, holding my controller, fighting Juratotus.
Wow.
I think that was just about the most damning experience I ever had with a monster. And that cemented for me just how much I hate Juratotus.
All right, yeah, that's a pretty good argument. All right, do you have a story as to how you got hooked in Monster Hunter?
How can I early teenage Upgreid had a Wii in his living room, and at one point I just went over to the local game store and picked up a game. Didn't really think about what game it was going to be, and I just ended up grabbing Monster Hunter Tri, and I played Monster Hunter Tri Swax for a little bit, and I got completely walled, and I gave up on the franchise for the better part of the next decade. And then one of my friends sent me a message, and he said, hey, there's this game that I'm playing, and it's called Monster Hunter. Have you heard of it? And I was like, yeah, well, I played it a little bit when I was younger, and didn't quite get the hang of it, and it seems pretty cool, but I'd be willing to give it a shot. How much was it? How much is it? And it was on sale at the time. So I was like, okay, yeah, I'll just get it. And I started by picking up the Insect Glaive.
Wait, was this with Monster Hunter World?
This was with Monster Hunter World.
Yeah, okay.
So like this was about around the time that Call of Taroth launched, was around when I started playing World. So I picked up the Insect Glaive, really, really enjoyed the experience, finally clicked with a weapon for once. And then in Iceborne, I picked up Hunting Horn. And I think from there on, I was a lost cause.
Okay. Now we will get into the actual questions of today's episode. As I mentioned on the intro, this is all about the mechanics of the game. We're going to go deep into how exactly does Monster Hunter work in terms of mechanic, of systems, of combat, and everything else involved with that. And these two guys have really, really studied the game. I'm not talking about like playing a lot. No. This is almost like the scene in The Matrix where like Neo is watching like the zeros on the ones. These guys would be like around that area of like perception of the games, right? Because they really, really studied. So When it comes to the current iteration, however, we're first going to talk a little bit about their impressions of the game, and then we will get into the actual mechanics. Have you enjoyed Wilds this time around? Oh no!
I'm gonna say this. I like Wilds, but not for Wild's sake. The thing is, a lot of throughout all of Sunbreak, there was a lot of complaining that we just don't have the tools, and the tools that we have are not properly maintained, and it's really difficult to add to them. One of the calculators that was used for swags maxed out like 4 or 5 different cells and sheets. That is about 50,000 characters of math. Really hard to maintain. And Wilds managed to be so, I don't want to say unenjoyable, but so not gripping that a lot of the tools that we were hoping to eventually get, see the website, for example, so no more fiddling around with Google Docs, proper and maintainable calculators and such. We have them now because we do still want to engage with the game stuff, just not necessarily with the game itself.
Yeah, I entirely agree with you there.
Wait, just to understand. So there's an aspect. Yeah. There's an aspect of the game that you enjoy because it is a continuation of previous work that you've put in the franchise as a whole. But when it comes to Wilds in and of itself, it's a bit frustrating to deal with it. Is that what I'm like? Is that what's going on?
It's not so much frustrating. It's just a lot of nothing is what I feel when I play.
Jesus. Okay. All right. Upgrade.
I enjoy the idea. I enjoy the idea of Wilds more than I enjoy playing Wilds. I don't think that's entirely Wilds' fault for me. I played a good chunk, and I do mean a very good chunk of Sunbreak, and I played it very long into its life cycle. And, I got busier, life started happening. And of course, we started up the Wiggler project, and I found myself in kind of this weird state where I only play the game as far as I need to understand the game well and to be able to say, yeah, I've done this. And then move on to actually breaking the game down into its component parts. So I find that I'm enjoying the idea of working with Wilds much more than I'm actually enjoying the game. I don't think that that's a particularly damning thing for Wilds specifically in my case. I think that I've just hit this point where I enjoy the theory crafting more than I enjoy the game at the moment. And I'm just patiently waiting for Wilds to meet my current expectations. Good. And I feel like Wilds hasn't done that for me yet. So I'm just able to hold out by doing all these other things that still contribute to the community, that I'm still interested in doing, that I've wanted to do for years. So I'm still pretty happy with the fact that Wilds exists. But if other people, if other people were to ask me to boot up the game and go play, I'll happily do that. But I won't boot the game up of my own accord. And I think that's kind of where I sit with Wilds right now.
Right. So do you share this sentiment a little bit, Sasch? It's like you like, in a way, deconstructing the game, researching the game, understanding the mechanics and everything. But when it comes to actually playing, it doesn't really do it for you.
That is pretty much, yeah, I would say that is the thing.
Right. Perfect. Interesting. Well, I think that this could be even like a common sentiment for some people. Just people looking for a specific experience, not finding it, then getting busy with something else that is related to the game. For example, it's a little bit of what happens to me. I like making content for Wilds, but I wouldn't say that I've been playing like religiously lately, because when I actually sit down and like play Wilds, my sessions don't last very long. Usually I go out with like an objective, and I manage to get that goal rather quickly most of the time. Mm-hmm. Well, so if, Wilds maybe not doing it for you in terms of gameplay, but where do you find the fun in the game? Like, well, you told me that right now with Wilds, it's about the theory crafting, making content like to help people understand the mechanics and whatnot. But when it comes to like Monster Hunter as a whole, where do you find the fun? Is it the combat? Is it speedrunning? Is it like the exploration? What is it?
Monster Hunter, I think, has this beauty to it that there's so many levels that you can enjoy it on. For me personally, I like the theory side of things. I like to understand. This is going back to when I started Try, like teenage years, similar to Upgrade. If you come from a mostly Pokemon, Zelda sort of perspective, you're just impressed by how different it feels, and you're kind of in disbelief that someone could make something like that is so deep. And then you kind of just start digging. So that theory side is still there. That is a way I've enjoyed Monster Hunter since I started. And then off that comes the set building part. You know, like the preparation phase on hunts, where you match your set to fit that matchup that you're playing. That whole preparation, that whole planning, the research that goes into it, and sort of the restraint that you get from whichever RNG system is in there to like work to like be challenged in what you have to work with is very enjoyable to me. And then now that you made all of these preparations, you kind of want to go and use them too, right? Like what good is a preparation without a use case? So I typically go and find usually somewhere in the realm of 1 to 5 matchups that I really enjoy, and then just start grinding them for no reason other than to get better at them because I enjoy them so much. So it's, for me, it's somewhere between the underlying theory, the mechanics of the game itself, and matchups, the combat itself. I feel exploration is not that great for me, and the story might as well not exist.
We cannot really say that Monster Hunter is a franchise that has been very strong when it comes to story. But everything else I can relate to, like just the idea of like targeting a monster and then trying to prepare and use all the resources that can be more favorable in that particular matchup. Yeah. What about you, Upgreid?
So the game, for context, right? I feel like I need to go on a bit of a tangent here. So the only game that has exceeded my time in the Monster Hunter series is this tiny little game called Warframe.
No!
I have played that game for about 10,000 hours. I have played for 13. How many years has the game been out now? 12? I think 12 years. And I have left the game multiple times because I have 100%ed the content. So that is my background. And I really enjoyed doing the exact same thing that I'm doing now in Monster Hunter in Warframe, where Warframe is a game with so much complexity and so much depth to its mechanics. Like there are so many different things that interact in different ways and, you know, mostly follow the rules, but then there's a little exception here and there, and you have to understand why that exception exists, or understand how this, you know, how X interacts with Y, and then suddenly Z becomes a factor as well. So I really enjoy looking at, you know, kind of that web of complexity. That's kind of the concept that draws me into most of the games that I play, right? This web of complexity. And perfect, I feel like Monster Hunter has that web of complexity in spades, but it also has an impact and depth to its combat that Warframe just never had for me. And so for me, it provides like a couple of those things that I just really wanted out of this game that I had already sunk so much time into. And that's really what sucked me in. You know, when I think about what's fun in the game, yeah, for me, it's going to be theory crafting and doing math and min-maxing. But the combat is what keeps me tied to the series. You know, and, you know, the exploration is fun the first time around, but it just kind of reminds me a little bit of being, you know, young Upgrade and running through any game and just being happy about it. Being able to see something and thinking, oh, that's cool, the developers did this. There are little details that you see through, especially in the mainline Monster Hunter games, that really just make you think, oh wow, it's cool that they thought of that. And so that gives me, I wouldn't say that's the reason that I find fun in the game, but it does give me some like pleasure when I play it. And yeah, I would say that the theory crafting, the min-maxing is what keeps me hooked. And the combat is what makes this game interesting for me.
Perfect, yeah. I would say, adding to that, like from the point of view of somebody who is not really that deep into the mechanics or the systems, like what I do is usually I try to refer to other people that are much more experienced with that than I am. And then I use what they understand to my advantage, basically. But the cool thing about Monster Hunter is that once you start delving into these mechanics and systems, the combat will almost always reflect that investment, right? And that for me, it was a notion of scale that you hardly ever see in games, or if you see it, it is not as well implemented as what you see in Monster Hunter. And that thing for me is like the peak of character progression. Even though Monster Hunter doesn't have like levels per se, there you still have a progression system that is very much tied to these other mechanical components, or these like, it's like what Upgreid said about like the web of complexity. If you engage with that web, the game will immediately give you feedback to represent the fact that you are kind of like touching on like some advantageous points. That's how I feel about it at least. So then when it comes to game modes, do you prefer to play solo or do you like playing multiplayer when you want to play Monster Hunter?
I feel like I'm going to have a very different answer from Sasch.
Go first.
So I am actually a multiplayer enjoyer. First and foremost, I've realized that, as I have less and less time to play games, I enjoy playing games with my friends. I enjoy games as a social activity. I enjoy the shenanigans. I still like to remind myself that I can play for fun and that I can play with friends, because it's so often now in games as a service that they really just try to make it a job and turn it into a chore. So I make a point of enjoying my time in multiplayer. However, there is a lot to be said for solo. So I used to do a lot of Cove to Roth runs, like speed runs, and also challenged myself to do 1,000 hunts of Cove to Roth over the course of a year. And it was absolutely maddening, and I enjoyed it. And I did all of it solo. And I think part of the reason that I enjoy, that aspect of things is because it really challenges me. It gives me the opportunity to become something better than I currently am. And that whole system of player growth is what allows me to really put all the stuff that I put on paper to practice. And there is really nothing more satisfying than just knowing when a monster is going to do this thing. So that solo experience is just it. Once you lock in with the monster, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's completely different from the kind of funny game that you get to play in multiplayer, where everybody's throwing the monster every which way, and then somebody gets hit and somebody carts for some stupid reason, and everybody laughs and moves on. It's like carting to a nitro toad. Things happen.
Yeah. I mean, I think we can all agree that multiplayer and solo have like completely different experiences.
Yeah. So I'm gonna mirror what Upgrade has said, because I'm the polar opposite. I am very much a solo player. I do enjoy, I'm of the opinion that the M in multiplayer stands for meme, and I live that.
Okay.
There's a lot of fun to be had.
Mm-hmm. No, yeah, like people when they play multiplayer, I would think it's not like they are really trying to try hard while playing multiplayer, unless you're, I don't know, maybe fighting Fatalis for the first time. But other than that, it's just like fucking about.
Some people do at least from my experience with the community, some people really do care about how others perform in multiplayer. And because I'm
Actually
a person
true,
that cares
yeah.
because I'm a person that cares about how I perform, I prefer solo. I have more control over the monster, and I have nothing to blame but my own inability, which is reassuring in a way. I do occasionally enjoy messing around with friends. I don't enjoy randoms as much anymore. And I can't even tell why, because I'm completely out of expectations when it comes to multiplayer. I'm not expecting anyone to pull their weight. The only expectation I have is on myself, which I believe is the healthy way to play with others. There's no point in judgment. If you need something and you're good enough to do it, go solo. If you're not good enough, well, get learned.
Yeah, okay. That's a very good point, because actually I think, and this is maybe something that not a lot of people maybe talk about, but I don't think I've seen as many people complaining mainly on Reddit, right? Maybe you will see this in Twitter a little bit, but I would say that it has become more common to see people complaining about the multiplayer aspects because there's other people carting. And when you ask to people that had the multiplayer experience from other titles, what you see is that they really, really like the fact that even if they are like, there's only one guy karting in the group, they still have this mentality of trying to overcome the challenge together. And so they still play, like they get together, they have like the 4 players in the party, and they just go on like a 6-hour session of Monster Hunter, and it doesn't matter if there's one guy karting over and over, they will try and try again until they get the fight done, right? And now what you have is just people see somebody else kart and they go off. They just like immediately start complaining on the chat or whatever, or even stupid things like seeing the Insect Clay player fly around because they like jumping instead of like using the moves on the ground. Like who cares? I think what you said is actually a good point. Like just have your expectations about yourself, and that's it. That's all you can really control.
I think though there is also something to be said for older games,
Yes.
versus newer games, and I would say there's been sort of a degradation of multiplayer etiquette in the last 2 generations.
Absolutely,
where
yeah.
Before you would at least be cordial with your other players. For one, that's just the online environment nowadays.
I have one for you as a follow-up on that.
Or you would swear at each other in different languages. And then there was also the expectation back in those days that if you were joining an SOS, you knew what you were doing. The person who was putting out the SOS either knows what they're doing or doesn't know, and that's just kind of the crapshoot, right? That's the chance you take. But the expectation is that you will be able to contribute and help. Whereas now I think people see SOS as, oh, let me just grab, someone else's multiplayer session and just join because I don't want to do this entirely on my own. So that expectation of like self-proficiency has been lost. And I think, a lot of those things that you described are part of some of the symptoms of that. Where people, no longer learn the monster pattern by themselves through trial and error, through like hours and hours of hunts if they're really, really struggling, and then figuring it out and being good enough to go in and help someone who's like double carded and has 5 minutes left. That used to be SOS etiquette, and it's just not there anymore. So I feel like that's part of the whole, issue surrounding modern multiplayer.
I would say
modern multiplayer.
Oh yes, go ahead.
A
Sasch.
couple thoughts. So back in my day, we had rooms to contend with that you could label, where you had like 30 odd characters to describe what you're doing, which was especially fun over here in the EU because there's just like, I don't know, 12 odd languages. So good luck figuring out terms that everybody understands. Where joining mid-quest just didn't exist. You had to communicate in advance, which is a double-edged sword of sorts. It is nice that you don't really have to contend with other people and their communications in modern games with the SOS. But you also get lower quality because you can't filter in advance the way you could back then. So you simultaneously cut down on the possible toxicity, but you also cut down on general interaction. Like, you're not really finding friends in SOS. You're doing that when you're hanging around and chatting, waiting for a third or fourth person to join your lobby. That's
Right.
where a lot of people met back in the day. And regarding the etiquette that you mentioned earlier, Upgrade, there is I'm so sad that post got deleted like maybe 3 or 4 years ago. There was a GameFAQs post about me back in 4 Ultimate, I want to say, about someone. It was titled amongst the lines of worst online experiences ever. And it was, I vividly remember that situation. I came into a group that wanted to do Raging Bracky, and I was just learning HPG. So I had a set that I crafted for myself that I theorized, as I do, to be more in line with my skill level at that weapon. And I sheepishly asked if they liked my set, because someone commented on it. And they said no, and then we left. So I proceeded, out of teenage me, out of pure spite, proceeded to triple card on purpose.
Okay. All right.
There's the Sasch I know.
Sasch is like, I don't play multiplayer because I don't like other players. Also, Sasch, triple carding other people's quests.
I mean, he said he didn't like my set.
No, it's fine. I mean, and what's funny, like you say this now, like you getting defensive about your set when you were a teenager, I can understand. People get defensive today as like full ass grown people. So maybe it's a core element of the Monster Hunter experience, but who knows?
Probably is, yeah.
Oh yeah,
Probably
like
is.
people
A lot of
really
it's-
tie their identity to their sets because their set has an
Defense boost.
implication to their gameplay, right? And
Oh,
your gameplay
true.
reflects how
Interesting.
you play and how you see yourself, like how you interact with your game is defined by the constraints of your set. So if someone says your set bad, they're, the feeling that they get is my set is bad, the way I'm playing is bad, therefore I'm bad.
Huh.
And
Yeah, I
there's
can
a
see
lot
that.
of-
that
Absolutely.
chain immediately goes down to personal attacks.
Yeah.
There's a lot of difficulty, I feel, when it comes to giving and accepting feedback nowadays, not just within MH, but like generally. A lot of people struggle with being criticized and take criticism as a personal attack. And the thing, like, I see it a lot, like a lot, and I think Upgrade, you see it too. A lot of people are not very happy about meta guides even existing because it allows that level of toxicity, and it's like,
Yeah, I
it
mean,
gets counter toxicity.
we will get into that. We will get into that for sure.
Yeah, I'm just
Mhm.
saying that a lot of the people that work on those guides couldn't give a flying shit about what you use in a game that you probably paid in the realm of $70 to play.
Yeah.
We don't care.
Pretty much, yeah.
It's mostly other people, but yeah.
Uh-huh. Well, when it comes to like the identity of the game, how would you describe the identity of Monster Hunter with your own words?
Oh boy.
Hit monster big number better.
Yeah, my brain needs dopamine, you know?
You kill stuff. You kill big stuff to wear their skin as fashion to kill bigger stuff.
I mean,
That
to be
is
fair,
kind of the
that's
notion.
pretty much it. Yeah. No, yeah, I can see that. Yeah.
It is very simple at its core. Like,
Yeah,
there's a big thing.
it's a
Go kill.
looter shooter with all of the looter and none of the shooter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Except you've seen Wild Hunt, right?
Perfect. Yeah, I can get behind that. Absolutely. Okay. Besides the combat, is there any other elements that you like about Monster Hunter?
I mean, think I speak for both of us when I say set building and the theory behind it.
Yep, 100%.
The main thing.
All right. Well, I
This-
mean,
this-
I would think set building is kind of like tied to the combat because it's like what you use to fight the monsters. Well, anything
At
else?
at a very surface level, yes. At a very surface level. If you go a little bit deeper, it's not just dependent on the monster, it is also the player. And then it's also in some games, the specific quest. Like, there's a lot to consider, and it's much more than someone, say, looking up a guide and figuring out, oh, I don't have that exact decoration, I'll just slot XYZ in and calls it a day. That is not what we mean when we say set building. It is about analyzing how combat flows. That is where the combat part goes in. And then it's pretty much going back to spreadsheets where it's about a dozen different thresholds, where it's about, well, what if I'm a little better or a little worse than this? And then just, spreading out and exploring, sort of simulating all of these different ways to interact, which you start with the combat and then you keep digging until you get out at combat again without actually having to do combat.
It's like mapping out the web of complexity, really. Yeah. And like really touching on that again. I feel like when so you brought up something interesting, Sasch, and I'm going to go ahead and dive in a little bit into an example that just popped up 2 weeks ago. So, I write a guide for Wild Hunting Horn. It's very, very in depth, like dozens of pages of just written text and sets and guides on how to play the weapon, just tons of detail. And somebody on Reddit asks a question that I see pop up on my feed. And it is, why are they using Burst 2 instead of Burst 1 and Adrenaline Rush 1? Because the numbers are better on Adrenaline Rush 1. And I was very surprised that someone else answered for me. They beat me to the punch. I didn't even have to say anything. They said because it's more consistent and doesn't have an activation condition. So even though it does less damage on paper, in reality, it's probably going to be active more often. Things like that really change the way you play. So like if I were to equip that 1 point of Adrenaline Rush, I would have to dodge through monster attacks. But that would have to mean that the monster is active and the monster is focused on me. And I'm also expending stamina to dodge, which may kill my max might uptime. So there are all of these like little pieces that fit together in the web of combat that are defined by how you build your set. And so the choice of 1 point of Adrenaline Rush can make or, can kind of make or break whether a set is really better or not.
Right. Okay. So there's this exploration, you can call it, that you go through when it comes to set building, and it's a little bit of a journey of discovery in a way, I guess, because there's so much experimentation that can be done behind these little, I wouldn't say like variables, that they allow you to navigate the game in another, like in another layer, basically. So that's what you would say. Okay. Yeah. Fair. Perfect. And then I think this is going to be like not the last question about the Monster Hunter in general, but at least from this segment. What are your impressions on Arc-Tempered Rey Dau? Come on. He's great.
So I really enjoy Rey Dau. I love Rey Dau.
Yeah.
I do not like the follow-up lightning strikes. I feel like that they amplified one of the worst aspects of his entire fight and made that his entire personality. So I feel like they really did Rey Dau dirty with this AT. I would have loved to see like really, really fast electrified, horn stabs, like the one horn stab move. Hey, do a wing swipe and immediately follow up way faster with several horn stabs. That would have been pretty cool. That's not what we got. we got some follow-up attacks that don't really have that great of a telegraph, and like, you know, it's there obviously, but it just seems to magnetize to you no matter where you are. You can be behind, like, you know, Rey Dau's left buttock, and it's going to find its way to you. So yeah, I really don't enjoy the AT iteration of the fight, but I love base Rey Dau. So I found myself a little bit disappointed.
I've done a lot of grinding on AT Rey. When I don't speedrun in an MH in a title, it is an act of protest. The only game before Wilds I didn't actively grind a run in was Iceborne until way past its quote-unquote end of life. And AT Rey Dau made me want to grind a run while also stacking all the things I don't enjoy on base Rey against me. So it was this very annoying thing for me personally, because there was a lot of stuff that I'm like, oh hell yeah, I want to run this. But then every time I get into the quest, I'm like, kind of don't wanna. Like, I'm absolutely with Upgreid. The aftershocks, why? Just why as a whole?
I feel like they're a lot worse for Horn because we don't have a counter. We don't have any.
Man, that's so sad. I think AT Rey Dau is the only monster that I've actively tried to speedrun because I was liking it so much, and now it's like, what?
So for me, that monster's new Udra. That's a different story.
You say that, Upgrade. We don't have a counter. Yeah, Swax has a counter. You know what happens if you counter these aftershocks? You get Thunderblighted. Enjoy your play.
Jesus. Okay. All right. I mean, to be fair, so I can see the complaint that, you know, the aftershocks are not very enjoyable.
It's not just that.
I mean, it doesn't feel, at least to me, engaging. Like, I would rather have to engage with an actual monster move instead of the same move set, but with aftershocks this time.
I like them. Okay. That is the problem.
I love his base move set. So
yeah, that's.
I just wish they refined him a little more.
I love a bunch of AT Rey. There's just a couple things that really break it for me. One being the area as a whole. There's why are ledges subject to quantum mechanics? Why is that?
Yes. Okay. All right. You know, to be fair, like there's so many invisible ledges on that fucking arena. It's not even funny.
It's the airborne spam. It's really janky as a whole. I really want to like him more. He's on the double wing slap. Why does his leg have a hitbox?
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
Okay, all right.
Right. See, like normally when I play Rey Dau, like regular Rey Dau, I'm playing offset horn, which is pretty rare. I don't play offset horn that much because, you know, resounding melody is just often much more optimal, and it's still pretty satisfying. But I like the experience of playing Rey Dau in the beta with offset horn, and so I just kind of stuck with it. That's part of why I love Rey Dau so much, because it actually makes me feel like the offset that I have is somewhat useful. So it's not optimal, but for me it's fun. I felt like I couldn't do the same thing with AT Rey Dau, and so it just kind of took away another way that I was able to engage with the combat in a way that I actually enjoid.
All of these are like completely fair takes anyway, so it's fine.
There's a notion within our friend group that it is really unfortunate for both Ray and Ark to have been in the beta because they're such good hunts.
Yeah.
It's really unfortunate.
We got spoiled. We got spoiled so hard.
We really did.
All right, well, so when it comes to the changes that have happened to Wilds as a whole, right? We have two main mechanics that were added. In this case, it would be like focus mode and wounds. But just in general, I want to talk about the things that you liked, the changes that you liked, and the changes that you didn't like. And here you can maybe comment on things like the secret, or maybe like pop-up camps, any new addition that is in the game.
So,
like try to like think of all of those things and tell me what did you like and what did you not like.
So I might want to add one more to that list of items of mechanics, which is weapon swapping.
Oh, sure.
And you know what? Before I boil over, Sash, I'll let you take this one.
I have no notes on weapon swap. It was early on, like really early on when it was announced. It was plenty of discussion in the sort of theory sphere, what it could mean for everything. And a lot of that has been somewhat addressed. There was the fear of everyone being forced to pocket horn if they go for times. There was a fear of optimizing around secondary weapons. And I am now no longer sure that because the expansions after the base game typically build upon the base game. I think the only thing that didn't do that was Rise, where they made rampages and then just said, nope, that's boring. So there is a non-zero chance and a fear that I live with that we'll get mid-combo weapon swaps eventually. But that is a future thing.
Don't speak that into existence, please.
Wounds and focus mode. So I know that you've spoken to Juzzy before, whom I also am in general contact with, and I sort of, part of me wants to disagree. Like, my hot take is that I don't hate wounds and I don't hate focus mode. There's a lot of cool things you can do, like really cool things. Say you have a Rathian charging a fireball. You can forward overhead morph that. That's a long, like you travel a pretty long distance and it's a pretty long attack. With focus mode, you can sort of angle around that fireball and still hit the head, which I think is really neat. But on the other hand, you also get 360 no-scope TCS.
Aha!
It's a cool idea, but the implementation isn't quite there yet, I don't think. Wounds? There's a lot of things you could have done with wounds. Conceptually, I like them because you are rewarded for sticking to a certain hit zone with a wound, which improves that hit zone, and you can use that to play matchups differently. There's been a lot of experimentation with specifically AT Rey Dau, where there was testing if it's better to stick to the head or to the feet, which changes how you play that matchup entirely, which is really cool.
Yeah,
like,
then, Mind's Eye became relevant because of that also.
Yes.
And so, yeah.
Well, not
On the other hand, you
exclusively,
have
but
wound
yeah.
seeding.
Yeah, that is yeah. It all looks back to cool concept implementation.
Yeah, okay, well, I guess it's important
yeah.
not to forget that between, like, the one thing where these two things communicate is focus strike, like, so... Focus
strike is something. I would like... This is from a Swag's perspective, because that's what I play, right? There's a lot of weapons that really go into the pump and dump playstyle now, where it's all their eggs are in that one basket, all they want to do is spam that one move, which hasn't really been all that different if you look back throughout the history of MH, but the way you can do it now is a little bit extreme, I think. And Focus Strike sort of adds to that, because in multiplayer, it's one of those situations where it's a lot stronger than it seems. Because Focus Strike on its own is probably not all that powerful if you just look at it. Like, I don't think it's super problematic in a single player perspective by itself. But if you add other people to it that can now spam their strongest combo that usually has some sort of downside, while the monster just can't move because someone is sacrificing their DPS in order to keep it locked down, and particularly in the Rey Dau case, where if you focus on the leg, it's also guaranteed topple. Like, you can dump out so much damage out of nowhere. It feels a little bit much. But I still can't hate it, because I'm all for making it a little bit easier for people to get into, giving them a few more fail-safes. But this is also kind of not it. It's really difficult to find a way to make it both fair and feel good, in my opinion.
Absolutely.
And the way it's right now, it's not it.
One of the things that I talked with Monster Hunter, there's it's another speedrunner that I've had on the channel. It's the notion that mechanics sometimes will cannibalize each other. And the way that he put it, right, was like, or the way that we were talking about it was, focus mode, I mean, focus strike is like really cool to do things that will allow new players to have a feeling of control, or to have just in general these really cinematic moments that will make you feel good when you're playing. But that leads to the players believing that it is the focus strike, the mechanics that is toppling monsters sometimes, when it's actually the part break interaction that happens due to focus strike. And so it becomes a more confusing situation now, because is it the focus strike or is it the part break threshold that is causing these reactions from the monsters? And how can you know if you don't have the context from previous Monster Hunters, right? As a new player. So an example of how the game shows you one thing and you can maybe, because of it, completely misunderstand the situation of what's happening. Which definitely. I don't think it's only happening with focus strike, which is a problem that I have with. I mean, I guess on the long run it doesn't really matter, because if people are having fun, like, what the fuck. But for me, who I am looking or paying attention to these interactions, I can see these things being devalued because of the way that these mechanics can clash sometimes. Upgrade, I think you wanted to say something.
Oh, yeah. I think so. From the hunting horn perspective, I really hated focus strike, like burning passion. And a lot of that had to do with how it launched for hunting horn, which was basically you have to do a perfect timing mini game that locks you in an animation for ages, and then you do absolutely nothing for damage, and the monster flinches, and your sound wave is locked in place, and therefore your sound wave misses, and your focus strike, after doing 5 perfect inputs of timing, does 0 damage.
Okay, wait. It's okay. So just to understand, because I don't really know how the focus strike from hunting horn works. Basically, you land the focus strike, and then you have to time notes in the animation, right?
Yes. So you have to time 5 notes in a row perfectly.
Okay. Which
will cue stuff. So that is really efficient for us, especially in particular with the Arshan hunting horn. So that allows us to basically simultaneously cue our 2 strongest damage moves back to back. It's a huge advantage for us. But when it came out, it was really, really trash. Just for context as to how trash it was, like if you look at the current damage that it has now, it did about like the actual note inputs on launch versus now, they increased the damage by 150% because it was that bad.
Jesus, okay.
So basically what you ended up doing was you would put in your 5 notes, right? And you would have to time them perfectly, back to back to back to back to back, which, you know, given the input issues that we had with wilds at launch with 2 button presses, especially on hunting horn, was an incredibly frustrating situation. You couldn't actually put your song in. Because if you put like 2 face buttons together, then you can't do another combination of 2 face buttons for the next 2 presses. So that was a whole mess with bad inputs, and just the engine in general.
I think that it was not only something that happened to hunting horn. I think Longsword was having input issues. Insect Glaive was having input issues.
So they have more input latency issues, but what we had was the case where you couldn't actually play certain songs at all.
Okay, all right. Okay.
Like you had to, I had to train with a metronome. So like I trained as a musician for a very, very, very long time. So I have a very strong sense of musical time. And it's like 80 anywhere somewhere in the range of like 80 to 90 BPM, like beats per minute. You have to hit those notes precisely within an 84 to 87 beat per minute window in order to make sure that your input doesn't get eaten by a double face input.
It
was bad.
Okay, yeah, no. All right.
Well, it makes me feel better about Swags now.
Yeah, all I have to complain is the fact that my Kinsec doesn't fly in a straight line, and that's it.
Yeah. So we couldn't even do our freaking jobs, and we did no damage to boot. And so, you do all that effort, right? And you get all the notes right, and you get your songs queued up. Great, awesome. But the part break happens before your actual sound wave that does the bajillion damage comes out. And so the monster flinches, and the shockwave is a static object, and the monster flies away from the shockwave, and no damage is dealt. Welcome to Hunting Horn. Enjoy your stay. This is the Horn experience.
That is, this is making me physically ill. God damn.
So, yeah, it was brutally bad. They still haven't fixed the ladder issue, but the other two issues are now fixed. So at least when you're landing your notes, you deal a substantial amount of, like a respectably substantial amount of damage, and you lock the monster down for a very, very, very long time, which is really nice in multiplayer, right? So at least now we have that like whole interaction going, but our shockwave still misses. So we still got a ways to go. So that's just the Hunting Horn perspective on Focus Strike.
Okay, all right. Well, I'm sorry.
When I go back, yeah. Trust me, I'm sorry too. Because Hunting Horn is like pretty fun this time around. I love the iteration that they have in Wilds. It's just, it's the little things that kill you slowly. And yeah, so as for the rest of the systems, I love wounds. I love the concept, at least. I don't quite like the way that it interacts with Focus Strike. I would rather that, like, Focus Strike not immediately pop the wound, but instead somehow, maybe even prolong it or do something, up to a certain time, or like, make it eligible to be wounded again even faster. Rather than putting it into like put it into the cooldown state, but shorten the cooldown state if it's popped by a Focus Strike, something like that. Because I feel like you really have to toe the line between hitting it just enough that you get the advantage out of the wound, and then popping it when the Focus Strike is about to break it, right?
Right, it's like trying
when
to...
the wound is about to pop.
It's like trying to get the advantage from the damage increase portion of the mechanic, but then you also want to get the advantage of interacting with the Focus Strike.
Right. Mm-hmm. And so you kind of have to, you really have to contend with that. Now, that does add a little bit of extra depth, but I really think that wounds need some additional, like, durability in order to really enable that, and enable that way of thinking, especially for more casual players who will just immediately dive into the Focus Strike, right? Okay. If you give wounds a little bit more durability, I feel like there will be a better balance struck between the advantage of a Focus Strike and, hey, maybe let's leave this for a few seconds and not let it pop, and then I'll do my Focus Strike. So like that kind of thinking could be encouraged with adding a little bit of extra depth to the wound system. So I really like where wounds are heading. I think that they need some tuning, but I really like where they're at.
Yeah, I would say that most people are very happy with the wound system. But that was a discussion at some point, like on Reddit. People complaining that in multiplayer, whenever a wound is open, somebody on the party, may or may not be the dual blades or bow user, is immediately breaking the wounds, right? Yep. And the feeling that you leave there for everybody else is that you're not really taking advantage of the damage increase portion of the wound mechanic. So it was like people fighting over this whole interaction, and obviously, like in multiplayer, it doesn't really matter that much because things will die anyway. But yeah,
it's gonna wriggle on the floor. But yeah,
exactly. How can you argue in favor of this argument, where you want more meaningful interactions between the wound and the player, if there's not enough weight behind it to actually like try to push for that?
Yeah, and I just feel like they need to add some more interactions between Focus Strikes and wounding and increase the depth of the wound system in order to really make it worthwhile. But it's a step in the right direction. It's way better than the Clutch Claw.
That's absolutely, for sure.
From which was kind of the grandfather of the grandfather that beat everybody that played that game with a belt. That was the Clutch Claw experience.
Yeah, for sure.
Yep.
And All right. So my spiel on weapon swapping. I do not like weapon swapping, and it's not because I'm a horn main and I think that pocket horning is a problem. Because frankly, I could not care less. It doesn't have that much impact, right? At the end of the day, if 4 people want to bring whatever horn they have and just stack buffs, fine by me. That is not my concern. You know, hunting horn needs to stop being seen as a buff machine. So, you know, if you see a hunting horn in your party and or you know, if you see a hunting horn in your party and they just swap the swax, so be it. I don't care, right? But what bothers me about the weapon swapping system is the implications that it had for the deco system. Now, Sasch has said this before, but the way that the new deco system works, you're basically putting all of the decos that are compatible with every weapon. And I've made a simulator. I can actually see this like out on a spreadsheet where every single thing that applies to every weapon is on armor, and everything that might be weapon specific or is passive is on weapon skills. Now, that sounds really decent on paper until you run into this funny little thing called crit boost.
Oh, hell yeah.
Everything competes
here we go.
with crit boost,
Okay.
which means it doesn't.
Nothing competes with crit boost.
Nothing can beat crit boost. And it is the most frustrating experience I have ever had theory crafting in a Monster Hunter game, because I have to deal with slotting in Horn Maestro and an optimal level of attack boost because I can't combo deco my crit boost, and then just maxing out crit boost besides that. You want sharpness? No, sharpness is suboptimal because it's not crit boost. And I mean this seriously. On raw hunting horn, you don't actually put sharpness decos on there for the G Resounding Galahad, which is blue sharpness, by the way. You just stack attack up and as much crit boost as you can go. So, like, this is a big point of frustration for me because it's just crit boost. It's boring, it's bland, it's stale. And they were so close because they buffed the elemental attack ops to be within, like, maybe 2 or 3% of crit boost. Like, it when you run it into a simulator, it's really close, but it's not there. It's not quite there yet, and it's never going to be there because crit boost exists, and most weapons are running like crit boost 3 to crit boost 4 because they can't slot crit boost 5. And you know what's going to go there? It's going to be crit boost 5. So,
Okay, all right.
Yeah, I hate weapon swapping because of what it did to decos.
Asterisk, that is very weapon dependent. Very weapon dependent.
That's fair.
Wait. Pause. Like, how are you attributing weapon swapping to this problem with decorations? Is it because the game was designed to avoid people trying to have like passive buffs on the off weapon?
So it was made so that you can't have a useless skill on your armor when you swap to a gun. It's made so that you don't have handicraft on your armor when you swap to light bowgun, for example.
Right. So, like, to avoid players
And
from
handicraft
sabotaging
does nothing.
themselves.
Right. Here's the problem. They used to have a solution for this. If you go back to old gen games, right, they had this thing called handicraft ammo op. So
right, whatever happened with that?
And then if you go back to even as late, like recently as Sunbreak, you have the Kashala, like the Risen Kashala armor. And what does it have? It has like 2 completely different skills, one that's good for Blade Masters and one that's good for Gunners, because they realize that, nobody's going to use this armor if it only has 1 set of skills.
Okay, yeah. That kind of brings me up to the next point, which is there anything that you miss from previous Monster Hunters?
The deco system.
Okay, yeah.
I miss Monster Hunter before 4.
You're right.
Ledges. Why are there ledges in my game everywhere? And then I go and port old maps and I litter them with ledges. No, just give me a flat area to fight. Fucking hate
It's all
ledges.
ledges now. It's all ledges now, and I want to jump off them. I miss, in all honesty, I miss like the old deco system, but I'm not saying it in the sense that like, oh, I miss World and Sunbreak's deco system. I miss negative skills. I really love the idea of negative skills.
What? How? What is that?
Funny.
So basically, you could have like negative attack boost, and it would actually take away raw from your weapon. So you would have an armor set that like gives you a whole bunch of advantages, but in exchange you get this negative skill. And like the way that the skills were, you had to hit certain breakpoints, certain numbers, certain points in the skill in order for it to actually do anything, right? So you would kind of optimize to have as little negative skill as possible to avoid hitting any of those breakpoints, sure. But you can also just really full send and go into like negative crit boost and go way hard into attack. And I think that adds an extra layer of depth that's just missing to Monster Hunter generally right now. You don't really make trades in the way that you used to with the old deco, like with the old set building system.
Well,
so
I was gonna say, like,
that's kind of what I miss.
Yes, this is more about trading because, sorry, but just on paper, the idea of having like negative skills sounds ass to me. I'm sorry, just probably
just wait.
New gen brained, right? But I perfectly understand the feeling of having to trade because we did that on base world. Like I arrived to Monster Hunter in Monster Hunter World. Maybe I didn't have to trade as much, but you still had to do it. You couldn't have everything on base world, at least not at the beginning. And then, Iceborne came and things got crazy. But yeah.
So the reason I like negative skills is because it deals with two very, very core problems with modern Monster Hunter. One is overcapping and like general inefficiency with set building. So getting a little bit more in depth here, right? You have the concept of skill economy, where you only have X number of skills that you can have on your armor, X number of decos that you can put in, and how much is that actually worth on your set, right? So basically thinking in terms of equivalent attack boosts, how many attack boosts can I stack on this one piece of armor, right? If you think about it that way, then you're kind of on the way to understanding skill economy. So the thing that negative skills really do well is that they make the skill economy more dynamic. So you can have negative attack boost, but that means that you'd have to slot in an extra attack boost just to make sure that you're neutral if you really care about that. Or, you have a weapon with really terrible negative crit or just no crit at all, and you don't want to go into the investment of going into really, really high crit. You could have something that increases how much damage your sharpness does, increases the amount of, raw that you get massively, but you get tons and tons of negative crit skills. I mean, it's a trade-off that you can make. It's interesting. It's different. That is what I appreciate so much about negative skills. It's good in theory. Not always good in practice, but it's good in theory.
I want to slide in there. My favorite MH is Frontier, and they've experimented quite a bunch.
Excuse me?
No,
that's fine. But it wasn't that the MMO? I think it was, right? Okay, all right.
It is dead, unfortunately. The deaths had to go somewhere, and you can kind of tell in some way.
RIP to a real one.
So, Frontier does two things with negative skills that I think are really interesting. One of them is you'll know and remember Divine Blessing, right? That lowers the damage you take on the percentage chance.
Yeah.
That has a negative chance. That has a negative skill, and one of them, if you really go deep, the worst negative skill on Divine Blessing is called Death God's Embrace, and it reads grants a 1 in 8 chance to die instantly from any attack. And you can't.
That's amazing.
That's not funny. It's so fun. Like, that's one thing that is just hilarious, right? It's just really funny.
And it's that's what I miss. I miss that sort of stuff.
And the other thing is a skill called Reinforcement, which has a positive and a negative. The positive one is Red Soul, which increases attack power by 15, and hitting another player will increase their attack power by 30. If I'm reading this right, it's been a long one. Even those games are mostly solo. This applies to someone that has the skill Blue Soul, which is the negative version of this skill. So you can't have both on the same set. So you have an extra element where you communicate with people where it's beneficial if one of them has the positive and another has the negative skill, while also not allowing both to coexist on the same set. which I think is a really cool thing you can do only with negative skills.
Yeah, that's actually very cool. Yeah, I mean, most on for me, I think that the part where the sets are trying to communicate with other players on the party, that sounds really cool. Like, you can maybe organize your team to have one guy with the blue set and one guy with the red set, and that basically guarantees that now the party is a lot stronger thanks to just proper coordination and planning.
Yeah, I mean, good old inspiration. The one skill that, for most players, they think that it came out in Sunbreak. It actually came out in Frontier.
Frontier.
Yep, it's all Frontier. It all goes back to Frontier.
Interesting. All right.
Yeah,
Okay.
and it's like the quintessential hunting horn skill because you're basically just getting raw for the entire party for free.
Yeah, okay. Okay then, so I think that we are good to go now into the more mechanical aspects of the game. Now, you have already brushed on some things, but this is where I'm actually going to ask you things that are going to need more detail to the conversation, basically. Okay? So, in your opinion, why is the combat in Monster Hunter so unique compared to other action-adventure games?
Do you want to go upgrade?
It's really hard for me to put that into words. It's just a feeling. At least for me. So as hardcore as I am into the math side of things, I'm the kind of player that wants to sit down and sometimes just turn my brain off and take a game at face value. So I'm in a weird place between being like a casual player and a hardcore player, right? And on those days, yeah, it's like when I turn on those days when I turn my brain off, I enjoy the feeling that the combat gives of like just the weight of the combat, right? The weight that, in particular, the weight that the monsters have. Because if you go and play, any other game with a supposedly quote unquote similar combat loop, like a Souls game, right? Anything from FromSoft, what you notice is that the movements of a lot of your opponents just don't seem to fit the scale. And that is just one, and like, it happens so often that there is very little suspension of disbelief. In Monster Hunter, I think that it's done in a way such that it lends credence to the idea that these are like creatures, right? And so it kind of feels a little bit more like living, breathing combat. That's just kind of from the feels perspective.
Okay, so that would you say that there's a level of immersion that is achieved by having almost grounded combat, or a design that is trying to make believe a little bit that these monsters are just these creatures?
Yeah, the casual player side of me would absolutely agree with that. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay.
I would like to hook into that FromSoft section of the argument. The big difference to me is that in Monster Hunter it is designed from the ground up to be repeatable. Where in FromSoft games, bosses are often this hurdle that you have to overcome. And you can do that by brute force, you can do that by dumb luck, you can do it through skill. Monster Hunter kind of, sort of a little bit removes that, because not only are you going to have to face the same thing multiple times, inevitably, like through progression, low rank, high rank, and so on. You usually have to do it within a rank too if you want to wear their skin as fashion. Like, it is designed from the ground up to be a repeatable experience with a depth that I don't really find anywhere else. Going back to FromSoft games, you at most have two different what we call hit zones, right? Like you'll have some sort of weaker area where you gain more damage, but usually are more exposed to attacks, and you have one safer area at most where bosses take less damage. That is iterated upon really, really deeply in MH, where there's just so much more in terms of option. There's so many more ways to tackle a matchup, and it is designed to be repeatable.
I agree. I completely agree.
I'll just read, because fourth wall break, I took notes. The note on that I took is nowadays easy to describe. Imagine Elden Ring, but make fights last longer, repeatable, progressively harder and longer as you get further, with more fleshed out weapon combos, but fewer total weapon choices. More areas to hit stuff at with deeper impact on how fights play out.
Right.
That is coming off of what, 14 and a half or so years of experience with the franchise, and that is about as concisely as I can put it. It is, in its own sense, it is magical, the MH combat.
Yeah, just to illustrate, for example, in the AT Rey Dau fight, nobody really did this, but I appreciate that this is possible, simply for the people that feel that they need this. If you break the crystals on both of the wings and then the crystals on the tail of AT Rey Dau, he will no longer do the aftershocks, at least for a while, right? And so for somebody, you can obviously smack Rey Dau on the head until it is dead, but for somebody that really struggles with the shockwaves, maybe the other approach is a lot more interesting, because it removes something that makes you struggle more.
Yeah.
Simply the fact that that is there and that is an option already adds a new layer of interaction with the monster.
It could be if those things didn't have so much health that AT Rey was half dead when you did that.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's part of the whole web of complexity, right? You have all of these different mechanics that you can disable certain attacks with or modify certain attacks with. You have the ability to like interact across multiple different systems, stuns, topples, statuses, elemental weaknesses, just like general, hit zone knowledge. In the case of wilds, the wound system, all of that, they're just so intertwined. And if you look at the Souls games that I feel like a lot of people compare Monster Hunter to, because it's a lot of rolling based weapon swing combat. The maximum amount of depth that you get in the Souls game is really don't get hit and hit when you have an opening. And that's about as good as it gets. Like there's a lot of gameplay mastery to be had there. If you can parry the heck out of everything like a god while naked backwards, I mean, it's a flex, but that's about as far as it goes. And in Monster Hunter, there is just so much more. You can absolutely do that in Monster Hunter, and you can clear every hunt that way.
Well,
but it's not going to demonstrate mastery in,
That's a very good point.
That's not what mastery is in Monster Hunter.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
That brings me to the next point, actually, which is like, how would you define the core mechanics of Monster Hunter?
At a base level, it is very similar to the Souls-likes. The age-old advice brings it back best, I think. Hit it till it's dead, don't get it.
Yep.
It is very much that. So the difference and what makes Monster Hunter so different is that a Souls-like game, as you touched upon Upgrade, is very much around using openings to attack, while in MH, a lot of the movements that monsters do, a lot of attacks that they have, are very logical. And if you have played enough, if you have enough experience in the franchise, you will see a new monster. You will understand, based on that skeleton, roughly what moves you're going to have to deal with. And unlike Souls games, you don't wait for an opening. You just keep attacking, ideally. Like, going into that level of getting better, into that level of quote-unquote mastery, it's not about finding openings, it's about never dropping your combo. It's about high aggression, and there's a phrase that I use a lot. It's about forcing openings, where you couldn't safely use a certain combo or a certain attack that you then find a way to introduce anyway, even though it wouldn't be safe in normal circumstances. You can figure out a way to shove it in there anyway, and then improve up on that and up on that and up on that. That is something that is only possible because it is more combo based. Not quite like DMC combo based, but combo based nonetheless.
No, but I see what you
And-
mean.
And a bunch of the mechanics that allow you to get there are things like flinch thresholds, like part break thresholds, like special states and their topples, like raw interactions. You know, there's a lot of thresholds basically that contribute to being able to play to that level, to go into those. There's a lot of mechanics here that, if you understand them, you can abuse them very well to further your own game plan.
Yeah,
is
I've
what I'm getting at.
I've seen people compare Monster Hunter sometimes. Maybe it's a bit of a weird comparison, but they compare it to fighting games in the sense that you are contending with the monster to a level where you still want to go on the offensive, even when they are currently attacking you. Maybe at the beginning, when you're starting to learn Monster Hunter, you obviously want to avoid and like dodge and roll away, and that's almost what you do in fighting games as well. You try to block your way through the matchup, but eventually you start identifying these patterns and these animations, and you start to find openings where before there were none, and then you expand that like up to 11 basically.
If you look at who made Street Fighter,
Yeah, and I mean, there's also the fact that we use so much. We use a lot of fighting game terminology in Monster Hunter.
yes,
Right. Monster value or motion values. Thank you. I'm having a stroke. Motion values, and we have like perfect guards and things like that. So
Like the frame data also is very important. At least I think it's important.
yeah, it's just
yeah,
man, you could look at the frame data and think, oh yeah, these guys are breaking everything down from like, startup frames, active frames, recovery frames. Like we do that, by the way. We do actually look at all that information when we're breaking this game down. Like we think about it exactly like a fighting game player would. So it's not a weird parallel to make, because that's really what this game is. It is a 3D fighting game that is based on, it's a 3D PvE loot-based fighting game, which makes no sense when you put it on paper.
punchy
But
shooty.
it just works.
Punchy looty.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's one of the greatest things, I think. Okay, cool. Well, Sasch, you wanted to add something else?
The question was the core mechanics, and there are so many. There are so many. No, I think I'll stick to mine. There's thresholds that you're looking at, essentially.
Yeah, okay, perfect. Yeah. All right, well, speaking of then, do you think that Monster Hunter does a good job at teaching players these mechanics that you just mentioned, along with others that might be important?
No.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely
Okay.
not. 0.
Just no.
They get rated a 100 on like their vision of where, like, what the entire series is. Love it, right? Love the concept. It's absolutely incredible that Capcom managed to make this entire game series even work.
I tend to think of it as
they onboard their players. it's about their explanation of internal mechanics is about as good as a wet fart.
Well, I mean, to be fair, I tend to believe, or I have the feeling that Monster Hunter was one of those like beautiful accidents.
Yes.
Oh yeah. There was a tweet going around recently. Let me see if I can find it. That had something along the lines of like explaining the development of Monster Hunter way back. Something about like, Fatalis. Do you remember that? Did I send that to you, Sash?
Oh, let me see.
Oh yeah. So it's like an interview. I think Oceans.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh,
Oceans.
maybe
tweeted
I've
that.
seen this. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and I'll just read it out. So Tokuda, when we were playtesting Crimson Fatalis, we entered the quest in a group of 4, including Fujioka-san and myself. The battle starts with the dragon charging at the players, the intro cutscene ends, and of course we all got hit. It happened so quickly, I watched the message, "You have fainted, get replaced with quest failed," almost immediately. I turned to the group and went, "Huh?" Fujioka-san, I think I replied, "Huh?" And Tokuda. The designer responsible for the quest was next to us, so we turned to him and he goes, "Huh?" So,
All right.
if that doesn't explain how much of an accident Monster Hunter was, I don't think anything else does.
That's amazing, though. Just like the people developing the game, just all looking at each other, like, what just happened?
Yeah, I just think of the cat. Like,
Yeah.
that is them developing the game, and I love it for all of its jank and all of the issues that I may have with some of the like implementation and like all the polish that I started to expect with later titles. I still think I still think that was a happy accident, and I appreciate it for what it is. But yeah, the one of the things, because it was a happy accident, they didn't really think, in my mind, that they were going to keep their players and that people were going to keep coming back. And so I think they were used to this idea of a core audience that keeps coming, or like maybe more so the other way around. I think they weren't expecting that other people would adopt this game. And so they are really in a phase right now where they are learning how to onboard players to the series. They wanted World to be successful in the West, and they got their wish, but they were not ready to introduce players to a new series. And so I think they made Rise like way simpler, and in a way it worked. My partner of many years, the first game that she picked up was Rise, and for her, because the game was, a lot of people, a lot of veterans really hated Rise because they thought it was so easy and so basic and so like lacking depth. And you know what? I agree. But there's
bang. Shots fired.
But there's an advantage to that, which is that it's a really good game for onboarding new players.
It is.
Like really, really good. And so, my partner she has no experience playing any action games whatsoever. Like the most action games she had played was Breath of the Wild, very, very slowly struggling to do every shrine. So making the transition from that, to Monster Hunter was absolutely massive. And Rise helped her to bridge that gap. Now she plays with me on occasion. She doesn't love the series as much as I do, but that's okay. Everybody has their own tastes. But the fact that she was able to experience it and experience a little bit of the joy that I experience when I play the game is worth something to me. So I think that they're figuring it out, but they haven't gotten the formula down yet. They have the core formula down. They've really refined the core formula of the game down. So they're really good at keeping those returning players. They're really good at keeping their core fan base, at least up until Wilds. We've got some debate as to whether or not the core fan base is happy right now, but the old hardcore fan base. But
current game bad, previous game bad.
Yeah, exactly. Current game bad. Looks at current game bad. So it's just tale as old as time. I just feel like they're in growing pains right now. It is a lot of pain, and it's a lot of growing. So pretty proportional, all things considered. But I think that they do a pretty crappy job at onboarding their players, but they're getting better and they're trying.
I mean,
I would like.
Sorry, Sasch. Just wanted to say that I really appreciate this take, mostly because it's something that I don't think anybody has mentioned, just in general. And it's this idea that, Capcom has the core formula figured out, and they are trying to branch out to a formula that allows for new players to get into the franchise. And because we have also agreed that the core formula was a bit of an accident, touching the formula throws things out of whack immediately, right?
Yeah.
And that's kind of where we are with Wilds right now. Like they tried doing this, they tried going for a more accessible game, and they tampered with this beautiful accident, and now we're like all confused.
Yeah, they messed with grandma's cake recipe and nobody's happy.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
All right, well, Sasch.
On the onboarding thing, let me ask you, how many times have you seen a video or read an article, 10 things you didn't know about Elden Ring?
Oh,
And
I mean,
how often were those things something you already knew?
sadly, I never got into the FromSoft franchise because
Then I'll take Monster Ark or something else, like 10 things about X game that you wish you knew earlier, something like amongst those lines. How often have you
I
seen
mean,
those from non-Monster Hunter and you actually learned something new?
well, this is it's an interesting question. I would have had to prepare for this because just in general, the games that I play are either very intuitive or they are a straight up MMO style that if you don't have somebody trying to teach you specific things, you will overlook them because of the huge amount of just like information that you have to digest every time that you get into one of those type of games. So I'm trying to think of one. I would say, well, it's a complicated question also just because of the changing culture, to be fair. Today,
Yeah, to a degree.
it's just, it is a given that people will look for information just to avoid making these like little mistakes where you can learn from. And then you don't make the mistake, but also you don't go through the learning process. So I'm not really sure. But what is it that you want to illustrate with this question? Just to
Because I'm asking the same question about Monster Hunter now. I come to find that if you're completely new and you look for another game and you see those articles about other games, chances are that you knew at least 8 of the 10 things, if they even make it to 10. You already knew them because you read the tutorial. If you look at 10 things that you didn't know about Monster Hunter, there is almost guaranteed something, like, it's the reverse. The game is
I see what you mean.
terrible
Yeah.
at explaining itself. Part of the reason that a lot of older folk, a lot of more enfranchised folk are writing their guides is because we went through the pain of gathering that information, of learning those under the hood mechanics, of finding these numbers. And we don't really want to make others do that same legwork, right? Like to have the information more accessible to people is a big reason a lot of people do write quality guides. Just to like give a point on how bad the MH team is at explaining themselves. Like half the skills don't actually tell you what they do.
I
Power,
like
latent power, latent
the
power,
classic latent
power,
yes,
latent power.
Yeah, fucking. I even nobody watched this, but I even made a video about that, like saying, so if you're getting into Monster Hunter for the first time, try not to look for guides for the best build, at least for like a moment, and just read the scales. But actually, I do have to cut you guys some slack because latent power exists, right? And so it's yeah.
Under certain conditions, you get certain buffs.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, no, you know, another game that used to be really bad at onboarding its players. I have a history of seemingly playing these games. It's called Warframe. Kind of looping
All
back
right,
to that.
come on. Can we?
But it was seriously bad at onboarding its players, and there was this concept of adopting a newbie, right?
Yeah. Okay.
So like basically there's this new player who has absolutely no idea what to do, and a veteran's favorite, like it is a well-known veteran pastime in the Warframe community to basically just chill out on the starting planet and wait for a newbie to do absolutely, you know, the dumbest fucking thing you can imagine. Like I'm going to go and run around and open every locker, and I'm going to take 20 minutes to complete a mission that is literally just shoot a target in the face, grab it, and go home, because they think that there's going to be something valuable in those lockers, and there's not. From all those lockers, you get the equivalent of 2 kills worth of resources. So, you know, all of that to say that there's a reason that Warframe has the whole like perception of being a really, really open and friendly community. It's because the game sucked at introducing players to the game. And Monster Hunter has a pretty similar reputation, and I think it's for similar reasons. Like they're really bad at onboarding. So as much as I can see, so there's like a balance to be struck, right? with this is kind of a weird tangent to go on, but like with just general community toxicity and health and whatnot. As the community scales up, right, the community is just guaranteed to be more toxic because there's just a small minority of people that are very, very vocal and very, very toxic. That's just a given in an online space nowadays, right? And that's mostly counteracted by the positive interactions that you can have with a larger community. I have some slight fears that if Capcom really gets good at introducing players to the series, we will lose that sense of like general, oh, let me help the little guy out community that we have in Monster Hunter as well.
That's a perfectly that's a perfectly reasonable fear, I think, especially since I've talked to people that are worried about the fact of, about the social aspect being gone now. Players just straight up are not talking to each other. Obviously,
it's
it depends.
Very transactional.
It depends on where you go to, but still, like that's something that it seems to be fading away a little bit. Yeah. Well,
for sure, sure.
I don't want to like digress too much into that because we do have a question for that like later on.
Yeah.
I will ask you this, however, like, would you say that understanding the more complex aspects of the game has added a new layer of immersion to your experience?
No.
No, not really?
It did the exact opposite.
The opposite?
I'm not immersed in the world of Monster Hunter in the typical sense of the word, in the typical meaning of the word immersion. I'm literally taken out of that because I look at spreadsheets and numbers and stuff.
Okay, all right. Let me then illustrate this with an example with what Jussie said, for example. And it's the fact that by studying the game and studying the mechanics and the systems, obviously, when you do research, you're obviously outside of it, right? You're not really engaging with the game to that level. But then when you take your data and you apply it to your gameplay, doesn't that make like a new layer of immersion where you have studied this target so much that you truly know the target and you can dissect it to your favor? Doesn't that make you feel like more like a hunter, or like it's whatever to you?
No, it's the opposite, I think. Like for me personally.
That's fair.
If I sit down for a run, right? And I know I'm gonna bash my head in against this thing 1,000 times. I think the fastest I've ever finished a grind for a run was in the realm of like 12 hours. Like you don't feel very immersed, right? You don't feel like you're doing this. It's, at least I don't. For me, it's a very, very scripted sort of event. There's not much intuition or feel left at all. It is very numerical. It's a very almost mechanical approach to it, where eventually I get into the zone where it's just happening, but in a pleasurable way, right? Where
you hit like a flow state
doing that. Yeah, but I don't think of myself as a hunter that actively hunts something. It is I almost always see myself as a person with XYZ understanding and then ABCD things to go through, more so than, actually interacting with something quote unquote living.
Yeah. When I see a monster now, I see a list and I see gauges. I don't mean that in the sense that I have mods that show me the gauges. I don't need those. I just see it in my head. And that's the thing. Like once you have too much understanding of the game, you really just see it, like you were saying before, it's seeing the ones and the zeros, right? You don't see the game anymore. You see the logic that underlines the game. And you start to think in that logic. And so, that really changes, I guess, my understanding of the game. Does it change my immersion? It depends, right? So I've had this, I've mentioned before the duality of how I play the Monster Hunter games. And when I'm playing with my friends, I don't really see gauges. I see just, I really try to experience the game with my friends because it's fun that way. I see it as fun that way, right? And when I'm playing with my friends, I'm playing for fun. I could play literally any other game with my friends. There's a reason that an entire genre of like friend slop games has come about because it's fun to play with the people that you know. and enjoy the company of. And so, I don't really think much when I play with my friends. I just kind of like, oh yeah, I get to spend more time looking at the monster animations while it's wriggling on the floor. I get to spend more time wandering around while my friends ask me to actually help, because I'm like, well, you guys said you wanted to enjoy your hunt, and I'm just going to, keep the monster on the floor. So enjoy your hunt. I'm going to go and I'm just going to go mine some ore over here.
Oh my god. Okay.
Go buy.
So, you wanted whimsy and wonder, and that's what you get. So
Oh, I hate whimsy.
So
Come on. It's one of the great
so,
things of Monster Hunter.
there's-
But anyway.
there's that side. There's that side of me. It's a long standing or well, I wouldn't say long standing, but fairly recent joke amongst some parts of the Monster Hunter community, whimsy and wonder.
What I hate whimsy.
But-
What has whimsy ever done for me? Whimsy doesn't pay my rent. Whimsy doesn't do my taxes. Fuck whimsy.
What is this?
What's a whimsy? Does it increase my DPS?
It's the first time that I hear about this, but I think I get it. All right, well, so then, sorry,
But
there's
like,
this... oh yes, go ahead.
It's just yeah. Sorry, I was just gonna say like, yeah. If I would say, as someone playing the game casually, no, it hasn't really affected my immersion because I choose to be immersed. If I'm playing solo, like, absolutely, it has completely changed my perception of the game. I no longer see a monster moving around. I see numbers. I see code.
Yeah, okay. Well,
I would.
maybe it's a thing about semantics, but I would see that as an additional layer simply because I guess when I play, I see both things. Obviously, not to the level that you guys do it, because I understand that there's thresholds here. I understand that there are like different bars and resources that you can engage with. I do not know them by heart. I go like full just by intuition. So maybe that middle point allows me to still see the monster while also keeping my head on the numbers at the same time. So that I wanted to know because that's how I feel about it. But I guess when you like cross a line, there comes a point where, yeah, you're not really paying attention to maybe the animations of the monster as much, and you're only trying to manage these different things. Sasch, you wanted to say something?
I will just say that I think I speak for both of us and for a lot of people in the sort of in that level of technical skill, that we love it all the more for that. It does not take
100%.
away the enjoyment. It is quite the opposite.
All right, well,
Kind of. It's weird.
This is no, I get it. This is the next question, anyways, which is like, just in general, there's this perception that maximizing the damage in this game is seen as taking the fun out of the game. Why do you think the community has this feeling with the whole idea of optimization like that?
It's a mixed thing, I would say. It's a mixed thing. A lot of games are about solving things. About solving things. Like be the fight, be the puzzle, That's sort of what people think of as a guide. And it is very easy to ruin the game for yourself by spoiling yourself for all the things that are coming up, for not wanting to think about these things yourself, right? Monster Hunter is a franchise that you can't purely solve. There is like, you can definitely solve a meta for the average player with average assumptions in average conditions. You can definitely solve that. Like, we do that regularly. Like, it is not that complicated, I say. Sitting on spreadsheets.
It's not hard to simulate the average player. It's not difficult to simulate an average.
But having that information does not necessarily make the game better or worse for you, especially in Wilds, where the difference between whatever jank you cook up and a fully optimized set is relatively minuscule, relatively speaking. It's no longer like it isn't. So we come off the back of Sunbreak, where just doing whatever and hitting a certain baseline in set building is a difference of easily double the damage.
Yeah.
Now, you are also stacked against creatures where you have to do that thing a couple a couple dozen to a couple hundred times. Like a case example is the 4-piece gore set on Para, Arch, and Swags, the standard role, the quote-unquote standard set. That takes, 31 full releases to kill the average Socia. If you use a comfort set, you're looking at 32 to 33. I don't think that your game is ruined because you killed something 2 7 seconds each combos faster.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
This goes back to the idea, for example, like when we were talking about scale, you have really noticeable indicators, usually. Maybe in previous titles this was more prevalent. You have very noticeable indicators that a change in your set had an impact, a considerable impact. And you could see it in the damage that you were dealing. You could see it in the way that the monster was now behaving whenever they were taking damage. There were like feedback indicators that would point you towards specific resources, which maybe in Wilds it's a bit confusing because, like, what, as you said, what's the difference between having an optimized set and not having one? Well, there is a difference, but it's not very noticeable.
Exactly. And even in the older games, with the exception of Frontier and possibly now, the timer is never so tight that you can't make it by just messing around. Almost never. There's a Latrion and Fatalis, but even then,
Yeah.
even then.
I mean, I mentioned memeing around with my very, fairly casual friends and just going to mine ore because they memed on me for doing a little bit too much damage. And I can afford to do that because the timer doesn't matter.
Yeah, for the most part, it doesn't. I'm still coping for the day that it does. Bring back Musa and Zelion, 1 million health, 10 minutes.
Come on. I mean,
heroics mandatory. Let's go.
What? No.
I'm not joking.
I'm sure you're not, but I completely see the value of timers. I've never got the outrage with Fatalis and Elatrion because I thought that what they were doing with the community was valuable. How? Because it took people outside of the comfort zone that most of the Monster Hunter experience has to offer, which is you can just swing and things will eventually die, right? And that's good because like that incentivizes players to keep playing because you need to at some point win a little bit. And then Elatrion and Fatalis come around and there's specific conditions in which you have to be a little bit aggressive and you have to play a little bit better. Otherwise, you cannot just like win just because. You have to put in the work now. And that took so many people out of the comfort zone that it created the controversy that it created.
But that's the thing. That what we can do with guides in Monster Hunter is explain why the things are happening and what would be reasonable and good countermeasures to those things. We cannot play the game for you in the same way that a guide to, say, a puzzle game will just solve it for you. You still have to put in the legwork. You still have to get better. And that's why I don't think that optimizing ruins the game, personally.
Yeah, I have to agree with that. Like, a lot of people will say, oh yeah, like, you've optimized the fun out of the game. I can't use any other set. And I'm like, well, first of all, I doubt that you're, and I say this, the general you, right? I doubt that you are good enough, like, to really squeeze the damage out of this set to the point where swapping out that point of adrenaline rush for a point of burst is going to make that difference for you. I really doubt it, right? So that's point number one. Point number two is that you can run whatever you want. No one will stop you. The timer isn't going to make you like fail. This isn't hunting horn in Frontier, right?
You wouldn't.
And then oh yeah, go on, Sash.
If you look at that's the other thing. It's in a similar vein where I see a lot of I don't use meta because I don't speedrun. Look at a speedrun. And then look at the meta sets that, like, specifically any good guide recommends. And you will notice they're different. The reason is that we optimize for that average person, right? For that 9 to 5 job, has to get groceries on the way home, is home by like, I don't know, 7 p.m. and gets maybe an hour or two to play, so that they don't have to do the legwork. That is one big idea here. They're not gonna go and grind a heroics run. They're not gonna play at 10 HP that they meticulously mapped out to get to exactly and then stun lock a monster to death. You don't do that casually. There is a lot of work and a lot of grinding that goes into that. You don't play to that level of extreme precision that goes into some of these runs that then use a different set and sometimes a whole different playstyle. Like it is a very different thing.
Like I've worked with many runners over the past 5 years to review their sets, to optimize their sets. Sometimes for weapons I don't even play, right? And it's so involved. It is incredibly involved. So in my mind, right, as a theory crafter, if you're able to like theory craft and make sets and do math for the average Joe, you are kind of getting to the point where we can like really say that you're super, you're already at the point where you're way more knowledgeable than the general player base, given that the player base is so large nowadays. But you're at the point where you can go and sit in the chat and just tell people, hey, this is going to work. And that's great, right? But if you really want to achieve like total mastery of understanding the game's mechanics and understanding set building and understanding optimization, to the point where like back in Sunbreak, I was doing calculus in my head, like optimization calculus in my head, because I had to do it in order to optimize some of these sets. That to get to that level, you have to work with runners. It's like that one unemployed friend on a Tuesday vibe. They have everything down. I had discussions with people about moving from Hellfire Cloak 3 to Hellfire Cloak 4 in Sunbreak because they knew the breakpoints and it would mess with their script if they went up or down a level. Yeah, it is that detailed.
No, I understand that, and I think that when we get to that point, I feel that it is very difficult to make the average player interested on that.
Yeah,
I'm talking about like the stage right before, where it's like, all right, so like, what's the point on even trying to optimize sets? And I guess for the same question, like, why do people feel that this is taking the fun out of the game? Well, I think that in a lot of cases also, this has to do with the fact that, there's a saying that I think is very appropriate for this, and that is, you can take the horse to the water, but you cannot make it drink.
Yep.
Right? Yep. Which is, for the most part, what I think it's happening. It's mainly the thing that is happening right now with this whole idea. But I want to combine my next question to this part of the conversation. You know how there's this general idea that in Monster Hunter the game at some point will click, like something will click for you and you will start understanding the game, or not even understanding, but you will start to feel things intuitively, and that will be so attractive and so fun to you that you will start engaging with more Monster Hunter just in general. So my question is, do you think that the game can click multiple times throughout your interaction with Monster Hunter? And
no doubt in my mind.
Okay. Yeah. And if so, how or why?
I feel like the first time that it clicks, it's just understanding your weapon, understanding the flow of combat, right? The most basic this clicks is understanding your first combo loop and really getting used to it, right? Understanding the inputs so much that it becomes second nature. That's the first click. The second click is when you understand, your matchup for the first time. You go up to a monster and it does this little tell, and you suddenly understand exactly what it's going to do for the next 3 moves, and you have that tree going on in your head. That's the next thing. And then after that, it's just kind of understanding when the part's going to break, and eventually you're able to predict everything, right? And this, I see gauges now because I've done this so often, but that's the start. That's how you get there. So yeah, it definitely clicks multiple times. There are different levels of mastery to every single aspect of this game, right? This is a very, very complex web of mechanics, and every single one of those has to click in order for you to really basically be able to play this game with your eyes closed.
Yeah.
You know, you can play the game entirely by feel after playing long enough, right? You can pick up a new weapon and master it, not quite instantly, but within a couple of hours. You know, master a couple of matchups with it in a couple of hours because you understand the game and how you're meant to interact with it in such an intuitive way. You know, it takes some adjustment. You need to get used to the moves. You need to get used to placement, all of that. Sure. There are 14 weapons and they all have a ton of depth. So you're not quite at square one because you have everything else down. But yeah, it can definitely click with you in a bunch of different ways. Like, you know, I was getting really bored of Sunbreak for a while, and then I tried Lance for the first time, and I just fell back in love with the game, and I played the heck out of Rise Land not Wilds, out of Sunbreak Lands for like 3 title updates. All I would do was Metal Wraths with Sunbreak Lands, and it was some of the most fun I have ever had. The game can absolutely click with you in the weirdest of ways at the weirdest of times. And that's part of the joy of playing Monster Hunter.
Yeah, awesome.
I would put it at levels too. When you're completely new, you'll be overwhelmed with mechanics and lack of information. And nowadays with mediocre and questionable information. Have you Googled anything Monster Hunter related? It's not easy to find the good stuff. It's very easy to become overwhelmed.
Yeah, and with Jussie, we talked about the whole aspect of like the misinformation going around also. So it's not only just
100%.
finding things, but finding the right things also, which you have no idea how to identify them. Yeah.
I've had people yell at me because Fextra has like...
All right, come on, just have some dignity.
Yeah. It's like they're like, oh yeah, well Fextra says that the Zoshia horn has a fire echo wave. And I boot up my game and I take a screenshot and I say, you could have just looked at the game and that would have been enough to tell you that it's a blunt echo wave. I don't know. I don't know what it is, but there's just so much misinformation and people aren't willing to see what's directly in front of them.
But anyway, Sasch, you were saying.
It's that as a newcomer. Of course, it depends on the person. Not everyone is going to go and look for stuff, right? The first time it'll click is when you get a feeling for how the combat flows. In non-Wilds games, it is very likely that you'll just get giga-walled by the first large monster you fight. So the first click is when you overcome that hurdle and then proceed to get walled by the next thing.
Yeah.
Like, it's just, you understand it bit by bit by bit that you go through it, right? And eventually it stops clicking, where it's just good now. And then you keep going. And then comes the level of how do skills interact? How do I make a set for myself? What impact does this have on my playstyle? And then you start trying things out and swapping around, and then it starts clicking again for how you want to approach something. This is part of the prep phase I mentioned way earlier, where you build for a specific matchup, because you now have an understanding of how you want to approach it. And then the skill system starts really clicking for you because of how many different ways you can interact with stuff. And then if you go beyond that and you want to go into running, from my experience, every single monster that you run will usually click multiple times for you as you get better at the matchup. There's like so many things that suddenly start falling into place as you go. It's beautiful in its own right. So yeah, 1000% can click multiple times.
I'm just wondering because I do think that there's not many things. It really depends on who you are as a person or what do you look for in games. But I myself found myself in situations where I thought I was satisfied with what I had accomplished with the game. I thought I had understood it, beat it, it was done. And for whatever reason, when I came back, something else happened. Maybe it's just a simple fact of like taking some distance from something that you're already doing a lot. And then when you come back, for some reason, you have a different appreciation of it. But it's this question is kind of like what I want people to ask themselves when they are wondering if they should try to expand on their knowledge or try to challenge themselves in some way. It's because there's the potential of the game clicking again, which is something that I really wish everybody can experience in this game.
Yeah.
At some point.
Yeah, and you can just do it while you're having fun. You don't have to sweat to do it.
Yes, exactly.
It's like you can just get better with experience. You can just have fun. You can just do the thing and be a little bit dumb about it. Like the number of times, New Udra is one of my favorite fights in Wilds, and I used to hate New Udra because I couldn't read it. It's the first time that we've had monsters of that body type and skeleton, and I didn't really have an intuitive feel for it at all, right? Didn't make any sense to me. Didn't like it. I love the matchup now. And there are a whole bunch of different reasons, some of them being horn specific, but every time I go in and I figure out something a little bit different, and there is joy in that. Like, for all the things that I might say about Wilds and the state of the game, New Udra's my comfort hunt. So I'll go in there and I'll just have fun.
Nice. Yeah.
You never really lose that, I think. Once you know what to look for, you can always find a new level of death somewhere.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, so when it comes to getting that point across, like, how do you think we can somehow showcase or illustrate the value behind optimizing damage? So, not for the sake of speedrunning, but for the sake of improving that experience, for expanding the player's experience in the game. Because, again, we're having this whole podcast to, like, kind of shed light into why we ramble so much about damage, right? And about optimization. Well, how does that expand your experience then? And how does that have the potential to make the game click again for you?
I think it's the one thing for me is that it amplifies the feedback that I get from the game. So if I have a suboptimal set, when I perform badly, I perform pretty badly, right? And if I perform well, I still have kind of slower times than if I were running an optimized set. But that's only because I've hit the skill level where the set actually starts to matter, right?
And
as my mastery increases, the feedback that I get from having an optimal set also increases. It's like a multiplier to how much feedback you get from the game. So the stronger your set becomes, the more you start to realize that you are becoming a better hunter mechanically. Because the game is just more prone to giving you those topples, giving you, openings where normally you wouldn't have found them. Simply because you're doing more damage, because all of those things are tied together. Like, it's all really complex, but at the end of the day, the more damage you deal, the more chances you have to interact with a lot of these complex mechanics. And, that your interaction with those mechanics as a player is what demonstrates your mastery. So really what it does is it gives you the opportunity to express your personal skill at the controls rather than worrying about whether the set is, holding you back. And so that's what I really love about optimizing when I play. I know that other people get a lot of fun out of total set creativity and running something really wild and out there. And you know what? You can optimize that too. I've optimized builds where I literally sheathe my hunting horn in Sunbreak and I punch a monster with an emote.
Shadowboxing.
Shadowboxing.
Oh, it's so beautiful.
So you could actually cast Silkbind Shockwave. And the shadowboxing emote in Sunbreak counts as a motion value. It has motion value, but you're also sheathed, which means that you can build up Frostcraft, and Frostcraft affects your Silkbind Shockwave.
it's just gonna be a bit jarring because I have a different point of view. Um, I don't I don't like optimizing for damage per se, which is probably really shocking from a meta shill such as myself. I prefer optimizing for playstyle. So in the Sunbreak example, you can have relatively normal playstyle. This is again swag specific because swag is what I do. You can have a playstyle focus around your normal combos where you just force it as much as possible. You can go the evasion based route. Yeah, I prefer optimizing for playstyle and for a player. There's been a lot of discussion that evade extender isn't really all that great, specifically for swags in pretty much every game. It teaches really bad habits. It's not like it becomes a crutch really, really quickly. You get way too used to it. And then that in turn can punish you for tighter plays and tighter openings. I used a set for one of my runs way back, title update 1 or 2, I think. Title update 1, where I used Max Might 3, Evade Extender 2, which for what I had at the moment was optimal. Optimizing to me doesn't mean just pumping more damage per se. It means getting more out of your set without either hampering or like giving yourself too many crutches.
So it's
that
like
can sometimes.
oh no, I wanted to say it's like polishing the particular strengths that you want to play into.
Mm-hmm. In a way, yeah. But I also don't like just looking at damage. One big problem that I used to have with guides and with quote unquote meta stuffs was that everybody sort of kept screaming EFR this and EFL this, which is just it's a part of the damage calculation where you calculate the sort of strength of your set before stuff like hit zone starts applying, which is extremely misleading in a sense. Like you look at a set, one has 1428 EFR and the other has 1412. What difference does that make? That is something that is not very easy to get across with those, which is why I'm pushing to opt for combos to kill instead. Because what you then can do is you can start dropping damage skills. You can start removing traditional pure offensive stuff and see if that affects how many actual hits you need to kill something. And if it doesn't, then that's room that you can use for your own expression. That is how I see damage optimization. You optimize for a baseline, basically.
Right.
Because what you mentioned earlier was you get feedback from when you use a quote unquote stronger set. While true, it is also not all the time. You have certain thresholds, you have certain skills that you immediately feel if they're not there. But once they're there, there's also only so much you can tickle out of your set as extra. And I'm typically, when I do guides, it is optimized for that breakpoint where you can't really take anything away. But I also don't want to tell people you must use XYZ deco and XYZ skill here. I want to leave room for expression without people gimping themselves because they're not quite there yet to match that player skill required to play such a set. Like an example of that would have been Dereliction from Sunbreak, especially after
good
the
old Dereliction. Yeah.
Interesting. I think most people have the impression that optimization means that you're going for the higher numbers only. And the more you look into it, I guess there's like this weird generalization where the builds or the sets that are mostly spread are the ones that have the higher numbers. But they are not really factoring in things like uptime or sometimes different interactions, or sometimes simply different preferences in players. So when you start looking for expression, you actually see that there's more variety there. There's more alternatives that don't necessarily have to do with damage output, but just in general, more with the interactions behind the damage, not the number, the interactions. Yeah, perfect. That's great. That's a great way to look at it. So now that you've mentioned a little bit of how you look at this, at set building in general, can you talk a little bit about the process behind it?
There is a lot of different approaches to it. So in Sunbreak, where I basically took over right after the release, starting Title Update 1, is when I took over Sunbreak for Gathering Hall, which is the biggest server, one of the biggest servers. I came off of having a lot of experience, having a lot of just raw practice, and having seen a lot of stuff, having interacted with a bunch of people, and knowing generally where the weaknesses are, what people struggled with. And then I went and took that into account when mathing out what the sets are. So I by the time that I started doing the math, I already knew what I could expect to fit on a set, and then started going through there. And then came out sort of the tickling, how much more can you do? How big of an impact is that? How much can I remove without gimping the set, to give people, to give a baseline, to give recommendations on what would make the set better, but still leave enough room for someone that needs that sort of space to do other stuff with. So my process in Sunbreak was very much playtest first, get very familiar with the game, and then work your way sort of backwards through the math to see what else you can fit, what else works. In Wilds, so Wilds was the first one where I was really involved from the get-go, from when the mine started to hit, and the process was convoluted. For a lot of it, there were a couple of people just scouring the sets and numbers. That was before we even had translations or explanations or descriptions of what the skills do. So we just started sort of mapping out what kind of budget we can expect. And then we went through slowly discovering that there's going to be a proper split between weapon and armor skills. And then it just started taking shape slowly as more minds came out, as our understanding of what we're going to have to work with got deeper. So the very first step for us as a group was figuring out a sort of baseline budget of how many skill points, whatever the actual skills are going to be, are likely represented on the armor. How much can we fit? And then came slowly learning what all the skills actually do and how impactful they are on a per point basis, and then as a whole. And then it started slowly developing from there. Our process, when we have data in advance, very much is figuring out what the budget is, how much we can fit, and then working backwards to what are the important things, the numerically important things to fit. Roughly what order do we want to go through that? Like a lot of that coming into Wilds was also very clear, because crit is crit and there's nothing competes with it. Yeah, and then it's just a lot of micro optimization. And after that is playtesting, where you figure out if it's actually feasible, the thing that you're making. Like, just because you can fit heroics doesn't mean that it's a good idea to do so.
Yep.
Right. Okay.
Bigger number doesn't always mean better. That's something
Actual,
that needs to be factored in.
Controversial, groundbreaking, like game, everything. Just who would have thought?
Yeah. Inconsistent, bigger number, not always better. Like, one of the key points that I always push is consistency.
Yeah.
Runners value consistency, and so should regular players.
Some do.
Some do. All but the craziest ones that are either consultants or unemployed. The so yeah, like, you know, being consistent matters. And I think that, at least my approach, the first thing I do is I really figure out the weapon, go through all of the mechanics, like really just playtest until I'm sick of interacting with the weapon systems, until I can, you know, say, you know, until I'm mumbling in my sleep that there's no way that I can play this song because it comes after a double button press, you know, all those things. And then it becomes the task of, like Sasch was saying, doing all the groundwork and figuring out how many points of skills you can fit, figuring out your budget, because optimization in this game, in Monster Hunter in particular, is always a close-ended problem. So you need to figure out what your limits are before you can optimize within those limits. So yeah, we figure out where the limit is, and then from there we just try and squeeze more and more and more out of what space we have.
Right.
And it's not necessarily a slow process, because there are things that are like really advantageous. So for one thing, people tend to value things that are passive. In particular, things that are passive are really strong because they're just always there, right? Every single hit you deal will have this passive skill active. The next thing you want to look at is things with really high uptimes and really high impact. So, you know, for example, you can have something that gives you 100 damage, you know, just flat, or like 100 raw, right? Over 10 seconds, right? 10 seconds of the entire hunt. And you can have something that gives you 10 raw over 100 seconds of the entire hunt. And I know exactly which one I would take, right? So your uptime on any skill matters.
Just to test myself on this, like, it would be the 10 damage over 100 seconds, right?
Yes.
All right. Yay, I understand things.
Because like the more consistent you are, right, it means that even if something happens during your hunt, or the more consistent the skill is, even if something happens during your hunt, that skill will not drop. It's always there.
Right. Okay, so
right? That is the value specifically for crit boost. Crit boost is always there. It is always active. It is a passive buff to your critical damage, and as long as you meet the thresholds required to hit a crit, you're off to the races. You are doing 15% additional damage for nothing.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I feel like the fact that we have so much crit now on well, in Monster Hunter in general, because 100% affinity builds were possible even back in world, like base world, right?
It was possible back in Gen.
Well, I don't know about that because I'm fucking like
I do.
Okay, yeah.
I was saying along.
Yeah. But the thing is, for example, maybe if we didn't have so much access to crit, now it would be an interesting kind of like interaction, the same as we said before, like it would be a trade-off to see if you actually want to build for crit, because then that means that you can build for crit boost, or maybe it's just better to go for only raw, right? But now it's like it's a situation where crit boost is always good because crit chance is a given on sets.
Well, it's not just that. It's a little bit more complex. The other thing is that you have so much raw already that crit being so one thing that they really did in Wilds that I do not like from a mathematical perspective is that they removed a lot of things that multiply after the rest of the damage calculation. So the way that the damage calculation works, right? Sasch, did you touch on this?
I have not yet, but there's much to be said.
So basically, you have the flat portion that goes into your damage. So that might be your items, that might be the flat portion of attack boost, right? All of those things. So that comes a little bit after everything that has a percentage. So basically the way that it works is you multiply your percentages together. So that would be like things like your attack boost at level 4 or higher, things like heroics, all of those multiply together. And then you add on the flat portion, right? Which is coming from items and from other skills and things like that. Burst comes to mind, resentment, so on and so forth. And then afterwards, you take all of that is your displayed raw. So that is what you see when you hit the pause menu.
Asterisk.
And asterisk. It depends.
It really does.
And then, you know, you have things like sharpness, which multiply after all of that. And then you have things like crit, which multiply after all of that. But they're all roughly at about the same point in the calculation because they're multiplicative to each other, and it's a whole deal. But what really matters is those things that happen after you add your flat damage, like the things that multiply your damage after you're displayed raw.
Right.
Wild's got rid of all of those.
Wait. So the reason why the multiplicative effects that are applied after are important, just to make sure that I understand, is because they tend to have more weight on the end result if they are applied at the end. Perfect. And so Wild basically just takes every variable and every multiplicative thing, and this is my theory.
If it's not sharpness or crit,
okay,
it just goes into the base percentage.
Perfect. Okay.
Which means that it has less impact, and therefore it can't compete with crit boost.
Very simplified. In older games, Swag's files used to be this is called a post modifier. They used to be a post modifier. They are not anymore, which is one, why element is now dead, and two, why set building for us has slightly different implications now.
Wait, so doesn't that mean that like power file is actually kind of, I don't want to say trash, but
it is absolutely trash now, but it is the best trash we have. That is sort of the problem.
Oh no!
Yeah.
So
on the other side,
simplified way to look at it is if you gain 10 raw from whatever source on top of your weapon damage, and you have 100% affinity and crit boost maxed, that crit boost is a 1.4 multiplier. So instead of 10 raw, you basically gain 14. Unless I'm super dumb now.
Yeah.
No, that 1.4, yeah, 14.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And without it, you only gain 12. If you now gain 100 raw from somewhere without crit boost, that is 125, but with crit boost, it's 140. So the difference went from 2.5, from 1.5 to 15. And it grows further. So the more modifiers you can shove at the end, the more they amplify what you already get.
Right. And because of the nature of Wilds, right now we don't have a lot of interactions that work like that, or a lot of calculations.
Exactly.
Perfect.
Yeah, like all of the stuff there is basically just, it already exists, and the two things are basically crit. Well, technically hit zones and motion values fall into that category as well in the damage calculation, but like that's a given, right? Those. And that can be largely controlled by the player.
I mean, that's a given for you. Like one of the reasons why Mind's Eye is becoming like super popular in general is because people just want to slap the monsters around, and Mind's Eye rewards you for that.
Yes.
Yeah.
So wait, is it possible to engage in optimization or in optimizing the different aspects of Monster Hunter or on the different aspects of a hunt without having to try hard too much about it?
Yeah.
Oh, 100%.
It is?
I mean...
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it's a matter of like, even from a mathematical perspective, optimizing is just getting the most out of what little, of what you've been allotted, of your allotment of time, skills, whatever it is you have, whatever limited resource you have, it is doing the best that you can with it. And so, for example, if you have X number of swings, where do you want to spend your time hitting X number of swings? Well, that's pretty natural. You want to spend it hitting the part of the monster that's the weakest. So just by getting better at the hunt, you are optimizing. You are actively optimizing. Learning your matchup is an exercise in optimization. The other thing is just like, oh yeah, you want to eventually think, oh hey, I want to get an extra stun here because that's extra damage. And now granted, Slugger does not give you an actual extra stun, it just makes the stuns happen faster and closer together. But some people put on Slugger for that, and some people get a lot of mileage out of it. So yeah, I can say my piece on Slugger, but some people really appreciate that. And you don't have to be a tryhard about it. You just have to want what you want, and you have to go for it. That's what optimization is. You just your objective, and you try to find the best way to reach that objective.
Yeah, this goes back to what Sasch was saying earlier. Like, not optimization is not only about making the damage number bigger; it's about setting a goal and working around that goal so that you can strengthen the way that you get to that goal.
Exactly.
Perfect. Yes. Sasch, you wanted to say something?
No, I'm just agreeing.
Oh, okay. Okay. All right. All right. So, well, we're almost getting to the end here. I wanted to know if there's any aspect of the game that you think people should try to engage more with to guarantee an overall more fun and better experience. Maybe it's, maybe you think this could be like increasing damage in certain areas, but maybe it could be about engaging with other mechanics that are not appreciated enough, like trying to get good. What could it be?
I think Monster Hunter is so cool because there's so many ways that you can enjoy it in.
Yeah.
Set building is something I can wholeheartedly recommend to someone. It can completely change the game for you. Like, that means both branching out of meta sets and also branching into meta sets, and then figuring out what works for you and how you want to play the game. In Wilds, we currently don't have a lot of skills and
a lot of variety
that support a different playstyle.
Yeah.
So in Sunbreak, you had skills like Wirebug Whisperer, Wind Mantle, and Frenzied Bloodlust, which would help you emphasize on Wirebug skills. You would have Embolden, Adrenaline Rush, Status Trigger that would help you with evasion-based shenanigans. And a lot of that you can combo together and just find your own playstyle through that. Wilds currently does not do that, but there are some things that play a little bit different. There is element conversion. This is, again, very swag specific, where you tackle things a little bit, like, ever so slightly differently, to the point where I really, really try to make it work. And it is just enough different that it's fun in a different way for me. And I think a lot of people, if they sat down and understood what makes their sets work and what's not so good or is only placebo, defense boost, then I think there's a lot of extra variety there for people. A lot of extra ways to interact with the game.
Well,
yeah.
This is something that has happened to me with, like, when White Flame Torrent and Sickled Blade were added. As a concept, I thought they were great ideas, but how they are represented on the impact that you have on the game, it doesn't quite get there for me, at least, right? But
I was play differently.
Well, at least you do with Sickled Blade, right? It's like.
Yeah.
Yes, because in order to activate it, you have to dodge like a couple of times.
You have to spam rolls.
Yes,
you have to be wet.
No, you have to dodge and you have to be wet. But yeah, I see what you mean. And so it was like
dodge, It
was a simple concept.
You don't have to dodge attacks, you just roll.
Yeah, it was a simple concept, but it was trying to offer you options, right? Just something that would change your playstyle around a little bit.
Yeah. I can sort of see that a little bit, yeah. I'm not the greatest fan of it personally, because I don't think that I touched this on the support video, where I don't think just looking at different bars makes it a different playstyle. I also don't think that just rolling 4 or 5 times before you actually engage a monster is a different playstyle, especially if you're not super rewarded for it. We're definitely at no shortage of affinity, so...
Well,
Frostcraft is a playstyle.
I see what you mean.
Frostcraft is a playstyle.
Frostcraft?
Yeah, Frostcraft is a playstyle.
Oh,
Crit Draw is a
absolutely.
playstyle.
Yeah,
Punishing Draws is a playstyle.
For sure. I think
there's a small community that plays Crit Draw horns, and it works because our main damage loop falls within the 5-second window of Critical Draw.
Right. Interesting.
It's also so unfortunate because there's no other skills.
Yeah. Well, for me, the thing about Sickled Blade is I look at it from the opposite side, maybe, where, like, if you are already so good at the game that you don't really need to roll a couple of times, just in general, the set will do nothing for you. But if you're a new player and you are constantly rolling because you tend to panic a little bit in between attacks, then yeah, it is doing something for you that is, it's compatible with this defensive kind of playstyle that you have, because maybe it's because of your inexperience, that's fair, but at least it feels nice that there's something there for people that are still there. And that I appreciated about Sickle Blade.
I can see that. The problem that I have with Slick Blade is simply how it was executed. The fact that it's locked to Mizu weapons is criminal. Because the Mizu weapons suck. They're just bad. There was a period of time where it was slightly better than an Arshan weapon for Hunting Horn. And then, I found a couple of bugs in my calculation sheet because that happens sometimes. And I played around with it a little bit better. And I realized that the amount of rolling that I was doing was, enough to kill Max Might back when Max Might was bugged.
So funny.
And realized that it's just like, it's not worth it. It's not worth the downtimes. So we swapped back to Arshan Horn, and everybody was, miserable because we're back on the Arshan treadmill.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right,
but the weapon skills. Tying back to my hatred of weapon swapping, the reason that this whole thing exists is because of weapon swapping. The reason that we have skills that are locked to specific weapons is partially due to weapon swapping, because we have this whole weapon skills mechanic now. If this had been any other game, I think Slick Blade would have been on armor, and it would have been an actually interesting skill. But instead, it's dead on arrival because it's not a deco.
Yet.
Right. All right. Well, do you think that there's any piece of information that is massively undervalued or maybe misrepresented, either by the game or by the misinformation that is going around on social media, that you think should be better understood about the game?
Hit zone values is the very first thing that comes to mind.
Yes.
What's the one squid that's weak to ice? It's not Shuwu, right?
Shuwu.
The other guy.
Yeah, Shuwu.
Is it Shuwu? If you look at
Shuwu is weak to ice. Yeah.
If you look at the Hunter's notes, it's gonna say it's weak. It's like 1 or 2 star weak to ice. Its lowest ice hit zone is 20. That is a ginormous hit zone for element.
For sure. I think that happens with Gravios. And Gravios is like the monster that is known even by average players to be just, you can melt
super
Gravios with water hit zones, right? And the game shows 2 stars for Gravios.
It makes no sense.
Yeah.
Right?
So we went from Sunbreak having actual numbers, but not being able to swap states. So like you can't see the different hit zones when the monster's enraged or when you break the part.
Nice.
You can't see those back in Sunbreak, but you can at least see numbers, and the numbers make sense. And then Wilds goes back to the stupid and unnecessary obfuscation of information that Capcom is so well known for here within the theory crafting sphere, and they just go back to the star system that has no use whatsoever. It tells us nothing of use.
It's also wrong.
It's also wrong. So yeah, misinformation is usually from Capcom, and looking at you, Latent Power, looking at you, Antivirus, before they fix the skill description, looking at the star system, just Capcom is the biggest distributor of misinformation in the Monster Hunter series.
That's actually crazy. It makes me annoyed also because there's so much meaningful interaction that can be had by paying attention to those things, and people look at that, and especially in Wilds, like or even in like World also, I think this happened a little bit too. It's like, yeah, okay, well, he's weak to lightning, but I still beat the crap out of it with my just raw.
Yeah, it's 3-star. It's 3-star weak to raw, and only 2-star weak to element. But what you don't know is the element hit zone threshold for like 2-star is like freaking 40, or for 3-star.
Well,
so you're never gonna hit the 3-star hit zone. It's ridiculous.
It's not even consistent because, for example, you will see monsters like Rathalos that I'm pretty sure that shows 3 stars for Dragon Element, but then you go to like Kiraniko, right, which is like the one more I guess the popular hit zone page where you can check this, and Rathalos doesn't have higher elemental hit zone values than Gravios do.
No, it gets as high as 30. It gets as high as 30,
but it shows 3 stars.
Yeah.
Yep. It
And
makes
then
no
Gravios
sense.
gets as high as like 45.
I mean, I
They
might
roll-
I might be wrong about the Rathalos thing, by the way, but it's just an example that I've seen this happening in the
Oh.
game. It is there. Like, there are some monsters that will show 3 stars.
Yeah, no. Here's,
And it-
yeah, 100%. Capcom lies. Like,
Yeah.
just their descriptions, their skill descriptions, their monster descriptions, a whole bunch of stuff just outright lies. I'm not saying that Capcom is doing this out of malice, but they are doing this out of either ignorance or incompetence. So,
think it's a
they
case
need to
of
do a much
multiple
better
teams.
job at, yeah. They need to do a better job of conveying their information. And that's part of the whole onboarding problem. Like, Sunbreak, Rise and Sunbreak did that right. And it frustrates me that because we have this whole A-B team dynamic going on, that one team just refuses to learn from the successes of the other and just keeps going on their own personal successes.
Yes.
So like World was really successful, right? And this is just World 2, Tokuda's vision. Every single item that you get from an event is eyeglasses because Tokuda can't see. But like,
All right, that's crazy. I never thought of
you
that.
don't get the you don't get the like wins that you got out of Sunbreak, and it just sucks. We had good hunters notes. We had
We had a good menu.
you know really cool like AI hunters that could just go and hunt with you, and they weren't good by any stretch of the imagination. They could do 1% of a monster's health, but they were like fun to play with. And the ones that we have now are just so dull. Like, even just from a fun perspective, they're just worse.
Yeah.
So
They even emote back at you.
no, they don't. I don't believe so.
Lame.
They are hyper lame. And like the thing is, right? Portable Team does a really good job of doing like fun, creative stuff that you really wish were in the mainline games. And the mainline games are like, nah, we're gonna make everything gray, washed out, and boring. And I just wish that each team could learn from each other. Like, what is the point of having games that have staggered development cycles if you can't see the success of the game that is out right now and say, hey, there's this feature, we're using the same freaking engine, we're using a lot of the same assets, why don't we just try and implement this where we can? Because I can't imagine it will be that difficult. Like, I know it's going to take time and effort, but someone has to see the game, right, and see the feedback and say, hey, yeah, this is great, why don't we do this instead? Hunter's Notes takes zero effort on anybody's part. Literally just rip the code out of Sunbreak. That's all it takes.
It's the reverse even. It's because the star system
They
makes
had to
no
go
sense.
out of their way to make the star system back in like the current engine. They had to go out of their way to make something actively worse.
I have a feeling that the star system isn't in Sunbreak because of the development constraints and because of the whole COVID situation.
Oh, and also probably because of Frontier devs.
Yeah, I feel like they just didn't get around to do it. That's why it isn't. I think that's also why some of the menus in Ricebreak were so different from before, because they couldn't get around to make them
and good.
Yeah, they're really good at excelling
They
under that
couldn't get
kind of
around to
pressure.
making those crappy animations. So like, I feel like the
That's just
number
more-
one enemy of like players being informed is Capcom.
It's very difficult to argue against that, to be honest. Once you start
Yeah.
like understanding some of these things, and then you look at your main source or your main like resource of information in the game, it is so incredibly vague and all over the place.
Here's another fun one. Hunting Horn, right? You go into the training area and you do a combo where you queue up 3 Echo Waves and play 3 Echo Waves in a row, and then encore at the very end. And you do everything perfectly. And it's going to call it something like high damage, high power combo or something ridiculous like that nobody's ever going to call it, right? Some players call it perfect trio, some players call it triple encore, whatever, right? And the implication of that name is that it's the highest damage combo that Hunting Horn has available to it. And it would make sense. It is 15 seconds of... Well, let me check the actual numbers here because I have them right here in this sheet. It is a grand total of 19 seconds to execute this combo.
Nah.
Right? 19.03 seconds.
Good
to
luck
execute
getting that
this combo.
time. Good luck getting that
And-
amount of time to execute anything
even
in
with
this game.
even with focus mode, wow. And so you would think that it's worth the time and the investment to do this, No, that's a lie. It's 20% worse than just doing a single echo wave and encoring it immediately.
Monster Hunter.
Yeah, well, it's unfortunate, but this is why, for example, this is actually why I wanted to talk to you guys, because I wanted to have people to kind of like shed light into some of these more obscure mechanics, and also to kind of show why they can be important, why they matter. And the frustration that I have sometimes with current Monster Hunter is the fact that it is very difficult to make the argument that these things are important, because people are killing monsters anyway, right?
Yep.
And when you have that dynamic, then it's like, yeah, well, I could try to optimize, I could try to kill things faster, but I don't see the point because I've already beaten the game. But obviously that's a different conversation. I think it's something that we've had here, and we've had just in general in the community. I wanted to see your insights into the more numerical, mechanical aspects of the game. Okay, we're almost at the end. I do want to know the following thing. Do you think that there's something that you offer to the community that you guys think that should be more valued?
Before halfway through Sunbreak, I would very loudly explain how much work goes into actually making these guides, actually making that information accessible, readable, and like not have it in obscure places all over, but like just gathering and re-expressing it. But somewhere about halfway through Sunbreak, from my experience, the attitude towards guides shifted, and I started seeing a lot of positive feedback to that. So I don't feel undervalued in what I do personally, be that being accessible, helping people understand, and like generally teaching the mechanics specifically of SWAX and of MH and helping them with their sets. I feel very appreciated about 90% of the time, which is a lot more than I could possibly ask for. So I'm good on that front.
Yeah,
That's great. That's actually great.
I'd absolutely echo what Sasch is saying. I think if there's one thing, I wish personally that players and the general community at large would appreciate our ability not just to spout out information at people and be informed and know what we're saying, but like to understand that we have the capacity to teach people to do what we do if they're interested. You know, in 5+ years of serious theory crafting, very few people, maybe I can count on one hand, have approached me from scratch wanting to learn what we do. And, you know, there is a community behind it. It's not just, you know, I may be, really, it's me and a very, very small team, like, doing Horn, but for the bulk of it, it's mostly just me, myself, and I, right? And Sasch can say mostly the same for Swax.
Yep. Jazzy's helpful,
at least in like the English-speaking world, right?
Yeah.
And, you know, that can be hard sometimes. It's a lot of, I wouldn't say pressure, right? Because people have gotten a lot better about that. Mm-hmm. The community at large has become much more considerate of their theory crafters, especially after a couple of incidents where, you know, we've just had moments where people have treated us fairly badly.
Rage Gaming says
just out of lack of patience.
Whoa! What do you mean, Rage Game? What?
It's fired. Not killing Rage Gaming sets is something that'll never sit right with me.
Oh yeah,
all right, yeah.
Just ask Rage Gaming.
Yeah, well, it's whatever, you know. It's
yeah.
Well,
but they've gotten better about it.
Yeah.
I think we had to go through those moments for the community to realize that, you know, even though they may not like what we do, and even though they may not use the tools that we use, we still provide something to other people that enjoy the game in a different way. So yeah, I mean, been going around on a tangent here, but like if I were to say one thing that I really want the community at large to realize, it's that we also have the capacity to teach, and that they can do the same thing we do. We are not special. We're not geniuses. We're just nerds with a bunch of tools.
Yeah.
And, we made those tools because we want other people to pick up the mantle one day, because who knows, we might get busy. Life might take us places. It's good that other people are willing to learn, and there is always a standing, maybe I should make it more explicit, and that might be on me. But I have always had a standing offer where if anyone is willing to learn anything about hunting horn in detail to get to basically the level that, Sasch and I have achieved of just understanding the finer details of the weapon, we're always here and willing to teach anybody who's willing to learn.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I will say that is highly, highly appreciated, but I do think that we are in this weird situation where if you're not really aware of the depth of Monster Hunter, you will not have any reasons to look for people like you or like Sasch, which is, to me, it's a tragedy. Because you know how we were talking about how the game can click many times? Finding you guys can make the game click many times over again for people. But they won't if they don't see any kind of like pressure to do that, or to, maybe if they are not challenged in a way, or even if like it's not even about that. It's more about finding the value behind these type of things that will get you interested.
This is why I like Frontier so much, because you no longer have the choice to not interact with it, because you have quests towards the end of that game that force you to not only know how to play, but also to understand the why about things and to execute at a certain level, because the timer suddenly starts mattering. And from what we've seen from base world through Iceborne, through Rise, through Sunbreak, and now it's even seeping into Wilds, you can tell that there's Frontier devs there. And Frontier in its state before it went offline is very much final stage Monster Hunter. Timers start becoming important. Things are going to get really fucking hard, and I kind of want to get there. But it's never going to happen if information on how things work are this obscure and this hidden in the game and this poorly explained. And we've seen some snippets of that with the with special investigations, for example. We've seen some snippets of that with Arch-Tempered Volcana. We've seen some snippets of that with Fatalis, where timers suddenly start to matter. Not super aggressively, but you start to feel them. And I can absolutely see that we're going to go that route, inevitably.
Yeah. Well, some of the things that you have said, like just now, do you think that, like some of these things related to what you do with your work with Wiggler? I think at some point we had to touch on that. I kind of forgot, but I do know that you guys have like a group. It's called Wiggler, and that is trying to offer players this resource. This, you're extending this hand to people to, to be able to interact or to learn more about these specific things.
So Wiggler has a long history.
The TLDR. Let me start with that. The TLDR is Google Docs is terrible for accessibility. Everyone can look at it, but the moment you introduce a phone, you can just kind of forget about it. So that was a no-go. And in order to make it more accessible in that sense, in order to make it actually behave the way that we want to, because some of the features we want are only in one format, but then other features we want are in the other format, and it's terrible. So we had to start somewhere, and that's where Upgreid and a couple others come in, where it's basically a standard for guides, and then also a place to host those guides. Now you can take over.
Yeah. So it started out with just me working on my hunting horn document, wanting to make it pretty back in Sunbreak. And then I started noticing that there was a lot of kind of tribalism in Monster Hunter set building communities. So everybody was in their little bubble, and if you had even the slightest disagreement, you were going to get banned from another server.
Yeah.
It was not a good time. It was not a healthy time for the community. And so I sat down with a few individuals and I said, look, this is getting ridiculous. We can't keep arguing like this. We're all intelligent people with a lot of tools at our disposal and a lot of knowledge. And it just seems so wasteful for everybody to just, fling shit at each other, just like a bunch of chimpanzees. And, we're better than this. And so the idea came about that we just make an independent community dedicated to deep knowledge of Monster Hunter and distributing that knowledge in a way that's palatable and understandable for the general community, for anyone who's interested. And that eventually branched out to like 40 core people and counting, who have a lot of knowledge about the game, getting together and working on, a whole bunch of tools. We have a website now that Sasch is working on, and some other people to join. One of the other founding member, Kat, he and I are working on a simulator. So essentially the ability to completely simulate every status effect and every white flame proc throughout your entire hunt, second by second, frame by frame. And we've written a tool for that. All of these things would not have been possible as solo endeavors.
Absolutely not.
That's
so
great.
The whole point of this is really to just bring a bunch of people together to give ourselves and the community tools that we never dreamed of having when we started out. When I started doing, guide writing and set building, I had no idea what I was doing. And, back in Sunbreak, it was just a lot. It was a lot. And all I had was a spreadsheet that hadn't been maintained for 2 entire title updates, written in another language, in another region, and with a bunch of nested if statements that I couldn't hope to understand. And a guide that was just bullet points and a couple of copy-pasted images off of GameCat. That was all I had to go on.
Yeah.
Good old times.
And no one else was willing to pick up the mantle. And so I thought, you know what, I'll step up to the plate. And just hope that I know enough to be helpful to people. When I eventually have to step down, I want the person who comes after me to have so much more than what I started out with.
Yeah, that's great.
And that is the whole goal of the project, is that, at least the dream for me, I don't know whether the same goes for Sasch, but the dream for me is that one day I can step back and not have to worry that the community is going to be less informed, that they're going to miss out on having someone there who can teach them things about small details and weird interactions and all the funny stuff, like the whole thing about flinching a monster out of your own focus strike.
Beautiful.
Yeah, the elegance of that. But my hope is that there will be someone, that it's always going to be someone there who can do that. And so I want this project to outlive my capabilities, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Given that Capcom does such a good job at relaying that information. Yeah. But anyway, so I really appreciate your guys' times. Sadly, I think this is we've already been talking for a while now. But I have to say, just from my own just personal appreciation, that this was really, really great for me. And I have a lot of interest for the things that you do. I do. It was like a super happy accident for me to find Sasch, because now I can talk to people that are way more knowledgeable about the game than I am. And that means that I get to learn a bunch of cool shit that I can apply into my gameplay now. That for me is really exciting. But I do wish that this excitement that I have can also be something that intrigues other people, thanks to this episode. And you guys gave yourself the time to do this. You gave me the opportunity to talk to you. and it was great for me. So I'm really, really thankful for your time, for your effort, and especially for, you know, like being so considerate as to try and keep things and the different concepts in a very simplified level, right? Because I know that when it comes to the numbers, you can go off and you can just like really get into some complicated, complex ideas, but you kept things easily digestible for the viewer, and that is just something that I really appreciate. So thank you so much. I hope that you guys had some fun, and I think with this we can end the episode for the Curious Hunter.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Yeah, thanks.